Hello and welcome to another author deep dive. I'm very excited to be chatting with you. This is actually one of, alongside Sanderson, this guy is my favorite author. I really like his work, and I am very excited to get to talk about it with you. We don't have very many people in the chat, which is okay. So I'll start bringing in my guests. So first off, my running mate, the always curmudgeonly Valerian.
Greetings.
Ooh, lovely to see you as ever.
Thank you. And look at our adoring fans in the chat. There are like 6 trillion people there already. We just started.
Yo. Now let me
Greetings.
actually I'm in another a Song Ice and Fire server.
What's this about another Song of Ice and Fire server?
I'm in another Song Ice and Fire server called Blood of My Blood. I'm just dropping it.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Cool. And Crimson Scorpio. I think I don't believe that I had much for him. I didn't think I had anything pre-made, but I should give him something from my collection.
You flatter me. Thank you very much for having me.
Always a pleasure. Oh.
Greetings.
Well, this is going to be interesting to say the least. I am very. I think that George. I think that George is one of the most interesting modern writers. Though admittedly, he's been around since the 90s, but he got catapulted to superstardom because of the TV show. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'm intrigued to kind of chat about that. I think it's going to be interesting to say the least. So, what are your guys' initial thoughts on George R. R. Martin, and how did you find him?
I started. My sister sent me a DVD of seasons 1 and 2 of Game of Thrones, so I watched them. I didn't know who George R. R. Martin was. I was trying to find out what was going on, so I looked around. Eventually, I figured out, it's based on these books. So between seasons 2 and 3, I went and read the entire series, and that's how. So if Game of Thrones didn't do anything else, but at least it introduced me to this work. I've not read his other stuff apart from Game of Thrones. I mean, Song of Ice and Fire related things like World of Ice and Fire and Dunk and Egg and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know very much about his early career. We'll talk about that later. So his early career is kind of a lot of niche sci-fi stuff.
Pardon me.
Oh, go for it. Sorry.
Crimson Scorpio didn't have a go at.
Oh, sorry. My bad. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. So, so I entered very late. I had watched the first season of Game of Thrones right before I started college, and I thought it was good, but I didn't I was very skeptical of it, its true quality, because I'm very wary of modern television, let's say, even back then. And I kind of just like I went to college and I just didn't have time to like watch it. And then my friend really got really into it, and he was telling me he would talk about it, and like he spoiled everything that happened, and I could appreciate a good chunk of it, but I really didn't see it. I was becoming increasingly jaded on how cynical I thought the story was going. But then I read into the actual novels because I was like, all right, is this like just a translation thing or is this like the core material before? And more I discovered that there were serious divergences, and then I said, okay, let me give this a real shot. And then I read the series, and now I'm wrapped up in and I'm wrapped up making games about it. But that's a whole thing.
Yeah, we'll kind of talk about that. Kind of originally, George R. R. Martin was putting out a book every 2 years, and then with Feast for Crows, in between Feast and Dance, there's a pretty hefty gap, and now the gap between when Dream for Crows is crazy.
It's interminable.
Yeah, it's really long.
Yeah. I think Swords of Swords might actually be longer than Feast for Crows, but Feast for Crows feels longer. I have to check, but Feast for Crows feels longer because you have to wait for the hard book.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Storm of Swords is the longest book.
Yeah.
Feast for Crows feels longer because you have to go through an entire book before you can get to Danny or John or like most of the people you're most interested in. That's what I was trying to say.
It's a slower paced book, and its first third is pretty weak. I'd have to say it's definitely the weakest chunk. It doesn't really pick up until Brienne leaves. It picks up. I mean, I really like the Ironmoor stuff, but it really doesn't pick up until Brienne finally leaves Cracklaw Point.
With Cersei and stuff.
I was thinking more about the gaps between when they were released.
Yes, yeah, you would never think that Game of Thrones, Clash of Kings, and Storm of Swords were they were all 2 years apart. You would never think that with the way the schedule is now.
Yeah, so kind of if we're going back, so in terms of dates, the first book Game of Thrones came out in 1996.
It's crazy.
The second book came out in 1998, and then Storm of Swords came out in 2000. And Feast for Crows came out in 2005.
Yeah.
And then Dance with Dragons came out in 2011, and Winds of Winter has yet to be released.
Yeah.
So it's taken it's taking him a while to finish these. This is kind of the dates of things. And it's just kind of taking a long time for the poor guy to finish. And we'll talk about that later. It just kind of seems as though the poor guy has kind of lost the plot, it seems.
I suspect he's we'll talk about it.
Yeah, he's probably got I think with Wheel of Time at least went for longer and put out more books in a shorter time. Kind of for example, with Wheel of Time, that's 14 books. And the dates are pretty consistent. So we start in 1990. The Great Hunt also came out in 1990. 1991 was The Dragon Reborn. 1992 was The Shadow Rising. Fires of Heaven was 1993. Lord of Chaos was 1994. 1996 was Book 7. 1998 was Book 8. 2000 was Book 9. 2003 was Book 11. 2005 was Book 11. 2009 was when Sanderson took it over and started writing it. Then 2010, then 2013.
Yeah, that's not so bad.
Yeah,
it's a long time to be invested in a series, but it's consistent,
Yeah. It's kind of as opposed to George's lengthy gaps in between of like 5 years, then 6 years, and now a decade. It's kind of made Winds of Winter the most anticipated book of all time. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only things I can think of that were parallel might be the last book of Harry Potter.
Okay, yeah.
In terms
that's
of being
probably up there.
anticipated.
I
Yeah, in
think
terms of hype,
yes.
yeah.
Being anticipated.
I would agree with that, yes. Though I think J.K. Rowling's writing productivity is a little bit higher just by dates, but also she's writing a smaller story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the shorter books. They're long, but they're not that long.
Yeah, especially the early ones are really short. Like you can read them in like a day or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of it's like kind of weird niche sci-fi, and I think kind of like it'll be kind of interesting to kind of like talk about like his approach to writing. Like everybody's kind of made jokes about like what was Aragorn's tax policy? Did he kill all the orcs or stuff like that? And kind of like that's the attitude that George R. R. Martin approaches his series. But I think that like he's a little bit more cynical in his worldview than Tolkien was, and I think that like it would be interesting to kind of discuss him as like, does he merit the title of the American Tolkien?
Yeah, he's a fair bit more cynical.
I always hesitate to use the word cynicism. I prefer pessimistic. Honestly,
yeah, maybe more pessimistic.
I think cynicism implies a lot of nihilism, and that I will argue strongly against.
Okay.
But
yeah, fair enough. Yes.
Yes.
Cynical can mean cynical can be Littlefinger is cynical.
Mm-hmm.
Littlefinger is cynical and nihilistic, but I think his writing is. I would definitely say his writing can be very pessimistic, like in the sense that things can just go bad.
Calling him the cynic implies that he's like amoral or immoral or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I'll just put my cards on the table right at the beginning. The big difference between the books and the show and the actual reason, the true underlying reason that the books are so damn good, is that there is a very, very subtle moral integrity to the story. And he's walking a very fine line, and he can fall off that line and he can fail. But so far he hasn't. And I hope that he continues to succeed. But it's there in the book.
Yeah, so like with cynicism is kind of a belief that humanity is not good, and that I would say more than like kind of like I guess like
I know in the classical sense, of course, I understand, but like a lot of modern commentaries of cynicism have like come with a very unhealthy dose of what's basically moral nihilism.
Okay.
And that's where I kind of like draw the line, but I understand what you mean. Like,
yeah,
believe me.
Yeah, it's kind of like I guess like the definition I'm using is kind of an inclination to believe that people are motivated purely by self-interest / skepticism, or an inclination to question whether something will happen or whether it is worthwhile / pessimism. So it really kind of depends. So I guess you could kind of say that, yeah, he is pessimistic about like how things would be.
Yeah.
Especially like in kind of a medieval fantasy world, and we'll kind of get into that. His strengths as a writer, like these are kind of the strengths that I put together because, and we could kind of like get into the degradations of each one kind of as we go through them. But I think that my two favorite character writers are Joe Abercrombie and George R. R. Martin, just by virtue of the fact that they are extremely creative in terms of the characters they create.
Yes.
What are your guys' thoughts on like George's characters? Like, I just love them because they're extremely unique. And
they're also very vivid. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh no. Like, yes, they are very vivid. I would agree with you. They feel like real 3-dimensional people.
even minor ones.
Yeah, like they all feel like they have their own agency, life, and just little characteristics that just make them fly off the page, agency like they're talking to you, like they're your friend.
Yes, they and I think part of that ties into that. Even though I think we're all kind of pick at his exact world building, he lets them he creates living people in a living context, and it really helps ground his characters in a way. Like I think his prose, like this ties into like his style as well. So I don't want to so I'm jumping a little here, but like as an example, right, I would say very similar things about Dune, in that the characters feel like totally different series, but real people. The difference is that Martin's prose is much more digestible than Herbert's, because holy crap, Dune is a grind. But the other two things he does with characters that are, well, first of all, he has great interiority on his characters, and it gets better as it goes. Like people usually will say that the fourth and fifth book, especially Dance with Dragons, the fifth book, has the best interiority of the characters, especially when you play Tyrion and also Quentin.
Theon.
Yeah, Theon too. Yes, Theon too is also really good in that book. And there's that. Another thing he does and this is something you can kind of only pull off in fiction, in novels, in a book, is he does a lot of secondhand characterization. Where he'll have other characters talk about characters, and that's actually like it's very easy to like maybe miss, but it's like a huge part of his writing is characters talking about other characters, and of course that does double duty because it both informs on the character being talked about and the character who is doing the talking, right? And that's like something you can't do in film or animation or whatever, or visual medium, because it violates the show don't tell rule. But in a book, everything is tell, so it doesn't matter. And I think the example that sticks out to me is definitely probably actually Renly, because you learn so much about Renly like after he's already dead. Spoiler,
Yeah.
He's a great example of that.
I think that we can kind of like just by virtue of the fact that Game of Thrones
I'm fucking around when I say that.
Yeah, true. That makes sense. Yeah.
The other thing, obviously, is interiority, which is another thing you can't really get in a visual medium. It's kind of hard, unless you do like a monologue thing, but that's always again kind of tricky.
Yeah, it's built into the structure because it's built into the point of view structure because each chapter is from a specific point of view. So you're immersed immediately into the point of view of the character, the perspective of the character in question.
Exactly, and it's something that works on a sort of formatting level. So I hate to just compare it to Dune, but again, like in Dune, Herbert will jump around within a chapter and it won't really click, like who exactly this perspective is from, and it kind of like upsets you if you're not like it kind of upsets your flow of reading. It can, and so with Martin, that's not a problem. You know who it is the whole time. And you're able to set yourself in.
Yeah,
and
like sorry, go for it.
No, and also it helps. It also just helps the characterization of characters. But like, for example, the lack of interiority in the show, and I don't want to just rag on the show, but like, for example, it really hurts. Like the two standout examples are Jon and Sansa, because it completely you can't get a sense of how smart they actually are in the show, because you don't have their inner you don't have their inner voice, let's say.
Yeah.
Not to mention that Jon's an idiot in the show anyway.
Well,
he becomes one.
Yes, but
after he dies, his brain never quite resurrected. That's the problem.
Agreed. Yeah.
It wasn't quite cold enough in the wall to keep him on ice. But yeah, and in terms of obviously you talked about it already, the actual robustness, the vividness of the characters, and again, like the fact that there are characters who we don't have interiority on, and that makes some characters just fantastic. I mean, Obviously there's the 5 kings who obviously we never get inside their heads, and that's obviously on purpose. Stannis is,
Let's see.
There's Stannis. There's the fact that you never.
Joffrey, Robb, Renly, and Balon.
Balon. Then Euron. Obviously, Euron is another character you don't get interiority on.
But you're still kind of. Yeah. Since and it's kind of that neat thing about Euron Greyjoy that like he is. If you probably were in his POV, it would probably be some of the most disturbing things ever.
Oh yeah,
Euron is,
yeah.
I don't want a POV for Euron, to be perfectly honest.
I don't think anybody wants a POV from Euron Greyjoy.
Yeah, I mean, you get the sense that people don't want POVs from the Ironborn at all sometimes, but I love them to death. I hate all the Greyjoys, and they're some of my favorite POVs.
Yeah.
Asha and Theon I like. The other one I didn't like so much, especially because getting a bit of a tangent, but like the Feast for Crows starts with
it starts with Aeron. It starts with Aeron.
Yeah, and like give me someone I know who they are first, and then introduce me to these other people.
It's definitely like he's definitely like she's trying to catch you on the back foot in that book, especially to start.
Mm-hmm.
I have to imagine that like a Euron POV would be something like a more competent Cersei's POV in terms of how demented it gets. Well, probably worse.
Oh, God help us.
Yeah, because Cersei is completely cray-cray in the books.
Yeah, like Cersei. I think
she is funny.
Yeah, she is actually. I think I said once in another stream, not with you guys, I said that like Cersei is like eventually she kind of like represents all human weakness, which may be a little harsh, honestly. But like she's incompetent, she's immoral, she's arrogant,
she's a narcissist.
She's narcissistic, she's a perversion of every virtue of her gender, which I know can be a hot topic, but like she's actually like bad in every way, like in every way you can imagine. Like you can be she's bad if you're like she's bad if you're anyone but her. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like she's awful, but that's a whole other kind of thing. And she's a very compelling character. Like you would think a character that, just to go back to Martin, like you would think a character who's like I'm describing as being that terrible would be like a terrible character in the same way that people complain about Superman being like a terrible character because he's too good. Cersei is too bad. No, Cersei's a fantastic character. She's like perfect.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, some people.
I will be remembered 1,000 years farther after you have memory is grinded into the dust. Or I don't think that's not the word. That's not the wording, but you know what I mean. You remember what I'm talking about.
Yeah, kind of that idea that she believes that she is amazing. And that she is the hottest thing since Shiara Seastar, and is completely delusional.
Am I the only one in the realm with a touch of wits?
Yeah.
With an ounce of wits?
Yeah.
She's
another. It's just partially. It's just like she is so utterly self-destructing.
Yes.
Like even when she thinks that she is really smart, like she's Tywin with boobs is how she thinks of herself, which that is bad because Tywin's not a good person.
Tywin Lannister is that's a whole topic.
Yeah,
the overrating of Tywin Lannister is like just you want to get my cockles up, just fucking like ugh.
Oh, go for why Tywin Lannister is overrated.
Sure. So first of all, Tywin Lannister is purposely overrated in the story. That's actually part of his character. He's like his whole thing is that he's actually not. First of all, he's not actually great at any one thing. He's not a great general. He isn't. He's competent at everything. That part's what makes him interesting. He's good at like every little thing. He's not actually a great. He's not a great schemer. He's not great with finance. He just has a lot of wealth. He's not a great he's a passive. He's not a great administrator. He just happens to be administrating for people who would, make him look so good. But like he has a very low bar to clear. with Joffrey and Aerys. Okay?
Yeah.
And
And then-
Cersei.
Yeah. And Cersei, yeah, sure. And then as a conspirator, and this is where, like, first of all, he gets really, really lucky. As a diplomat, he's just really, really lucky. The Tyrells basically fall into his lap. And as a conspirator, he also gets really lucky because the Westerlings basically give him, and the Freys and the Boltons, basically do all the legwork for him. Right? And people forget this, but the Tyrells murder his the beginning of the 1,000-year Lannister dynasty is killed right under his nose. Like, this man, I need to stress this because people don't understand this. This man is outmaneuvered by Mace Tyrell.
Who is not a very smart man.
He's a little underrated. He's not the genius. He's not a super genius, but he is underrated. But this is...
Because we hear about him from Olenna.
Olenna is like... It's overstated how much authority Olenna has too in the like, Mace is the leader of the family. He actually is. And he's actually Mace has gone from serving a lunatic to serving, basically a warlord claimant, to a smaller lunatic, to a child. And he's increased his personal power every single time with relatively little cost to himself. He's not quite that stupid. If anything, he's in danger of falling apart because he's too good. He's going to stretch himself too thin, let's say.
Yeah,
he's
too
too
ambitious.
Much. Exactly.
He's too ambitious, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is.
Yeah, but even though Tywin isn't as brilliant as people think he is, he's still a heck above Cersei in terms of ability.
He absolutely is. And that part of what makes him interesting. If he was just like Lex Luthor times like 1,000, and Lex Luthor's super interesting, but if he was just like Lex Luthor, okay, whatever. The reveal, sort of like the slow burn, I don't call it like a reveal, but like the slow burn realization that he's actually not that good, but he's that successful. It's like, oh my god, like this is like really a problem. Like it's kind of like reveals how fucked up everything actually is. And the whole Red Wedding, for example, like think about like here's how incompetent Tywin Lannister is. He had to sacred pretexts in his society to 15-year-old.
Yeah, and he kept losing to that 15-year-old on the battlefield.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Not directly, in fairness, but he was totally outmaneuvered strategically.
Yeah,
Not to mention...
Oh, go first, sorry.
Oh, thank you. That the Red Wedding is not as brilliant. I mean, there's the bit where Tywin says, explain to me why it's better to kill like 100,000 men on a battlefield than a few at dinner, and he has a point, but it's not as conclusive as people think, because no one in the North will trust him, and he cannot control. He and the Boltons cannot control the North.
Never mind that's a lie to begin with, right? Because it's not just 14 men. It's not even the 14 men in the dinner and the thousands of men outside. It's the 14 men at the dinner and the thousands of men and the thousands of men in the various shaping operations before that. Because Bruce Bolton was basically throwing away soldiers. And then you get to the fact that he's undermining the entire precepts by which he makes peace, right? The Red Wedding is not...
it does damage to his long-term diplomatic operations.
Yes, but even on a deeper level, right? Like, the Red Wedding is it can be... Okay, so it can be fairly asked in any story, like, how bad are the bad guys in the story really, right? Like, how bad are they really? Like, how bad is the Empire? How bad is... Okay, Voldemort's a bad example, because he's just bad. But, how bad is a character? Okay, here is how bad the Lannister faction, let's call them, is. They're willing to do this.
Things that violate their basic religious tenets in order to get what they want.
Exactly. Basic, it's it's morally repulsive and this is where I talked about before, I really object to the moral nihilist, the very nihilistic take on the story. The Lannisters are the villains. They are bad. They are mostly bad people doing very, very bad things for very, very bad reasons. They, and the Red Wedding is the point at which the story cannot be resolved in any way but their defeat. in a good way, and have justice.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because now the North will never ultimately surrender and accept them now.
Exactly, they cannot. Like they're not without being total moral cowards, right?
Yeah, and the Lancers cannot control. I mean, the North it's big, it's cold. They cannot control the entire North.
Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, there's also kind of the problem that the Northmen hate them, and the people they put in charge up there.
Yeah, and they can't rule by fear alone. They without consent, and they're not going to have consent because, as Lady Barbary points out, people from every northern house had people at the Red Wedding get killed.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This is part of the Founder Machiavelli's famous maxim, right? Like, it's not just about love and fear. It's like you can't be hated. The Lannisters are hated. They have a lot of power, most of which by this point is actually coming from the Tyrells, not themselves. But they're hated because they're hateable people. Like this is the thing, right? It's not just that they're like politically oppressive, although they are. They're also bad people to each other. And so, like, you can make a very good case that, you can make this crazy case that Martin's actually he's actually incredibly morally simplistic. And that he's showing how, I'm not saying he is, but you can make this case that Martin is showing directly how bad people make bad rulers. Mm-hmm. Because Lannisters are terrible, and they are terrible rulers.
Yeah. Like, Cersei is seriously pulling the realm back into the time of Maegor and is setting up for a war with the Faith.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, there's the religious. Yeah, there's the religious conflict. There's which I feel like Martin, like, in terms of like world building, to jump to that a little bit. Like, I feel like religion is one of the very like underplayed things in his medieval fantasy, because religion in the medieval world was like the medieval world was drenched in it. It was like, like you're breathing in Jello. I don't know what that means, but like, but in Martin's world, it's it's much more downplayed, but it's picking up, and so that's always interests me.
Yeah. Should we be moving on to plot twists, or should we carry on?
I think that like part of it's like even like his good characters, still feel like people. They feel very flawed. And they each have their own unique biases. Like, Ned Stark is biased against Jaime, and Jaime is biased against Ned, but they're biased against each other for very different reasons.
Yeah, that's true. I never feel like I'm, to use the dreaded word, I never feel like I'm reading like Mary Sue, right? I never feel like I'm looking at anyone unrealistic at all. I think the characters who are supposed to be good are not perfect, but I do think they show genuine virtue. I think he covers a wide and broad variety of different like mindsets as well, both within the POV characters and outside, and then outside the POV characters.
Mm-hmm. Like someone like Barbary Dustin is a very vivid female character, even though like we don't get her POV at all.
Yeah, one thing you hear said a lot about Martin is that he's like one of the best male writers of females like ever. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know if that's true, but like, he is like, I never got the sense that, okay, this is a man writing about a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would definitely agree. He's like, especially like just the uniqueness, like Arya and Cersei are not any way, shape, or form alike.
Yep.
And you get both of their POVs, where one is a very hyper-moralistic young girl who wants to get revenge, and the other one is this narcissistic psycho who kind of wants to burn the world down if it gets her what she wants.
Yeah, and you can say similar things about like Sansa too. Like Arya's a bit like, I think Sansa's a better comparison there, just because Arya is a bit like, Arya's story deals a lot less with gender, just because of the nature of her position.
Okay.
But with Sansa and Cersei, you see similar things, and it's very much, and also Catelyn too, and there's a gender component there, and you understand it. You feel like it's part of the whole their narratives and their POVs.
Yeah. And also, like, Daenerys feels like an actual teenage girl having a crush, as opposed to like a guy writing a girl with a female crush. First crush.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Daenerys in the show. I'm not a huge fan of Daenerys much at all, but she's very, very palatable in the books.
Yeah,
she's Sansa.
Sansa too. No, Sansa. Look, I'll tell everyone right now. Sansa was actually one of my favorite characters.
Well, what I was going to say is Sansa is interesting because she reads so much like a preteen girl, and it's like this guy like in his 60s is writing her, and it's very believable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he is like what you were saying earlier. The internalities of how he writes the characters are very, 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 very well done.
Yeah,
and like I think the like kind of like in terms of plot twists, it's kind of interesting that he can write plot twists that are so obvious when you read them back, but shock you when they first happen.
Yes.
Right. I mean, how thoroughly, like, how obvious is the Red Wedding in hindsight?
Yeah, and in hindsight you can see it, but at the time I didn't know. I mean, like, why is Catelyn attacking this guy? I mean, going up to this guy and like attacking him and stuff. Not attacking, but whatever it was, like Edwin Frey or whatever it was. I'm like, why is she doing this? What's the places is going on here? And then suddenly, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Then you read it afterwards, like, oh, yeah.
Well, even that, and this, obviously plot twist and the foreshadowing goes together, but, even before that, like Bruce Bolton is, like, hunting wolf puppies in, like, the second book.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a whole sequence where Arya goes to Harrenhal, like, with Bruce there, and there are, like, wolf heads on spikes. Like, it's, like, really obvious what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually works because, like, I talk about this, like, with the... In this case, it works because obviously it's set up, in terms of logically, but also thematically. So I talk about this a lot with my friends because I don't have a platform, but with like the Vader reveal in episode 5, right? The Vader reveal, if the Vader reveal was just "I'm your dad," right, it wouldn't matter, right? The reason the Vader reveal works so well is that it's a thematic fulfilling of the entire movie up to that point, because the whole movie is this gradual. It's this gradual increasing. It's a gradual increase in the complexity of the morals of the story, and this is I like boxing, so I'm gonna use a boxing analogy. And, the Vader twist is only like it's the 2 and a 1-2 punch, and the 1 punch, the jab, is actually the scene where Luke is having the vision of them in danger. And he he falls on his head, and he's like, "I gotta go save them." And then Yoda's like, "No, you're fucking not." And that's like the subtle, that's like the this is Yoda, the goodest good guy that you've met so far, gooder than Obi-Wan, telling you to do something, let's say, expedient or morally expedient. But the whole movie is like this, right? Like down to you can argue the Wampa is like this because it's an animal, not a malicious person. The fact that the Imperial officers are getting executed, even the honorable ones, right? Mm-hmm. The whole movie is builds, and then you're teetering on the edge, like Luke, and we can also go into the whole way the set design of the duel changes because he goes from this has been talked about, right? So he goes from a technological. I apologize, this is way off topic. He goes from a technological hellscape. The carbon freezing chamber is like hell, right? It's literally hell, right? And in hell, you can beat evil because he beats Vader in the carbon freezing chamber. Not really, but he beats him. And then he moves into this liminal space where he starts to get overwhelmed. And then he's thinking, he gets thrown out the window, and then he's on the catwalk, and there Vader starts pounding him because in the howling, void of uncertainty, when hell is when you're in quote unquote evil, very obvious hell, it's very easy to know what good and evil is, and therefore it's very easy to beat. But once you're in a place of uncertainty, and you're in howling uncertain chaos, it becomes almost impossible to do anything.
Yeah, pardon me.
And then, yeah. No, go ahead.
But we're going to be getting into Empire Strikes Back in a couple of weeks, I think.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to hold off. I apologize.
Yeah.
I just really
Oh, that's all right. We just probably should get back on topic.
Yeah. So with kind of like the foreshadowing, the plot twist, the major one that took people off guard, I think the initial fans. My mom actually read these books before the show ever came out, and she really liked them. But she wasn't necessarily as shocked by the Red Wedding as she was by Ned dying in the first book.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, wow, so he actually killed the main character. Dang.
Yeah, it's like, and the story can't happen any other way, right? Like, it's impossible for it to happen any other way.
Yeah. And it's just a moment of, oh, so that's where this story goes. So there is going to be very minimal plot armor.
Yeah, no, it's a great. It totally ups the stakes. It removes a character that you would say that like Ned, like, not that you would, but like you would say that Ned like has it all, right? Like Ned is like the character you want around to see the good guys through, and it just removes him.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, or John. With John, when he gets stabbed, I can't exactly say die, but when he gets stabbed at the end, in retrospect, you can see it building up.
Yeah, like when it seems as though all of the Night Watch just are just countermanding him. It's this slowly building tension between him and Bowen Marsh, and it becomes a really, really, really inevitable tragedy that happens.
Yeah, I think that's really key, right? Because like it's not like the Night's Watch guys are just being dicks, which they are on the show. You know, like there's a very understandable. Like I'm much harsher on the Wildlings than some people, but there's a very understandable reasoning going on with Bowen Marsh because John is fucking up. I don't think he's necessarily wrong. I'd side with him more than Bowen, but he's not going about it perfectly. And, you know, Bowen Marsh doesn't come across as just like a jerk or a racist or like some other stupid thing. He has a very he's very well motivated to do what he does.
Yeah, John he's a good chap, but he has his flaws. One of them being, and he's got his two basic flaws. One of them being his thing with the watch versus his family. You know, which is he going to do? Which is he going to side with? And the other being, he's a tendency to be a little bit arrogant at times.
He wants to do everything himself. He gets rid of he moves all his friends somewhere else. He doesn't have any friends around him, mostly, except Ulrich Ed. Just enemies, for the most part. Or at least people who are becoming more hostile towards him.
Yeah.
Apart from the wildlings, so he has to rely on the wildlings. It just gets very messy indeed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he's basically coming up against a lot of systematic and cultural animosity there.
Yeah.
That he can't really resolve.
Oh yeah, and he can't resolve in the way he's trying to. I mean, like, you know, his methods of controlling are very token. I would say they're very like superficial.
Mm.
I can be quite critical of John in book 5. I think he does kind of mess it up. I think like hate to do this, but like what Stannis does in the same book is actually, I would argue, the correct way to do it, because he makes the wildlings kneel to him and also convert, but that's a whole other thing. He makes the wildlings kneel and convert, and that's important because that's, even if it's just superficial and even if it's just like, you know, them just begrudgingly doing it or like faking it, they've still done it.
Mm-hmm.
He's demanding it because, like, so like in the third book, right, when Mance Rayder's beaten not by the Watch but by Stannis, the whole build up to that is, of course, you know, John goes to Mance and is like, basically, he's like, look, if we let you through the wall, will you behave? Will you not behave? Will you follow the law? Will you not be barbarians? And Mance basically spits in his face and tells him, fuck you, we do what we want, because that's the way wildlings are. And only then, and this is perhaps a hint of that subtle moral integrity I was talking about. Only then does Stannis, who if nothing else represents law and order, shows up to smash Mance Rayder. Because he spits in the face of an honest, he says, like, to live in a land is to follow its laws, and Mance refused to do that. And then Stannis shows up and puts him in his place. And then when Stannis lets them through the wall, chooses to let them through the wall, it is on the condition that, yes, you are my subject, and that means you obey the law, and you bow to me, you obey the law. Mm-hmm. And that's the correct, that is the correct way to handle that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting because there's a kind of parallel compare-contrast thing going on between Dany and Jon, because they're both trying to figure out how to use their power for good. They're both trying to reform ancient institutions.
Yep.
So there's an interesting thing going on where I think one of the differences that Dany is perhaps willing to listen to advisors than Jon is, or than Jon becomes later on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right. She's a little more. She also has better people around her. To be fair, like Barristan is not great. Barristan is like leagues ahead of Bowen Marsh, or like Melisandre, even. Like, and I like Melisandre too, but I think she's not quite focused on the right thing. Or like Selyse, that's another good example. Or like the other guys.
Selyse, Dolorous Ed is the best thing he has around is Dolorous Ed.
Yes, exactly, right. The different, like Daenerys is a little more, like Daenerys is like big character flaw, I would say, is that she's kind of capricious. And Jon is not, but but I think that's a good read on the situation. She has a little more, she has better advice, and she's willing to listen to them a little more.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it kind of like creates a lot of conflict because she's dealing with kind of a more complicated system than Jon is.
Oh, yes.
Jon's system is very simple. It's basically the Watch hates wildlings and they are running out of food. Dany is having to deal with the complicated institution of reforming a slave state.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
she's actually trying to, rule.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that I would like to talk about is kind of I think that one thing about George that has made him very, very popular is the ability that people have to read relatively sane theories, like R plus L equals J, to the crackpot ones of Tyrion being a time-traveling fetus.
It helps the what's the word I'm looking for here? It helps let's say it helps the shelf life of his work, right?
Yeah.
It lets it breathe. It's ridiculous. I hate those theories, but it keeps people interested. It keeps people engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there.
The best one remains Bolt-On, for the record.
What was that one? I'm sorry.
Bolt-On is the one where it's Roose. Okay, Roose Bolton and the Bolton family has always been just one guy replacing his face every generation. And don't get me wrong, I think it's bunk, but it's at least it's it's thematically interesting, and two, it came up with some great little aesthetic theories, like the fact that the flayed man on his banner is actually him, and it's him mocking everyone. It's him parading himself in plain sight, right? There was a sister theory, not a sister theory, but there was a little side theory on that was really good. I think that's where the idea that Robert Strong, the guy who's obviously the Mountain, mm-hmm. but the idea is that his head is actually Robb Stark's head, not the Mountain's head. And I actually really like that theory. I think that one's not impossible.
Mm. Yeah, since Qyburn is very much Dr. Frankenstein.
Yes.
Varys is a merman. I can't remember what the argument for that was.
I don't get that one at all.
It's just that you never see his feet. It's one of those silly.
Oh, well, that proves it.
Yeah, it's
It's it's one of the ones that are not like it's not worth talking about. You know what I mean?
It is. Let us not talk about the Varys Merman theory.
Yeah.
It is a silly theory.
Exactly.
I think Hot Pie is warging the others, don't you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what like George has done with kind of like usually the bad guys have like the major bad guys. Since I would say that like the major bad guys are the White Walkers, not the other houses. Is that a fair assessment?
I would have to sort of push back on that a little bit, in the sense that like because I mentioned this earlier, right? Like with like here's a good way of thinking about this, right? Would the White Walkers be? And this is kind of like this is the thing, right? Like there's a constant assertion that like the game of the battle for the throne does not matter. The war against the others matter, and that's obviously true. But there's a way in which they're linked, and that is that the decay and rot in the society allows the White Walkers to be a threat in the first place. A good king, if there was a good king and a well-run kingdom, the White Walkers would not be a problem. I mean, they would obviously, but they would be able to handle it. And that's the underlying like theme, and that's the way you tie the two stories together in a thematic sense. It does it matter who sits the Iron Throne? No, it doesn't matter who sits the Iron Throne. Does it matter who sits the Iron Throne? Of course, it matters who sits the Iron Throne. Of course, it matters who's
interesting. Because imagine if Jaehaerys or Aegon the Conqueror were in power now, or even Aegon the Third, maybe.
Yeah. So just imagine even just a king who's honest and willing to do the right thing, like Jaehaerys the Second.
Aegon the Fifth.
Yeah, even Aegon the Fifth. You know,
or Stannis.
Yeah,
or Stannis. Like don't get me started.
Yeah, Stannis is a good king, and because he believes in justice, and he doesn't believe in doing like things that don't have utility to them.
He's very utilitarian. He believes his platform is, his platform is very seriously truth and justice. That's literally his motivating principles. Mm-hmm. And he has a lot of resentment. Like, I don't think Stannis is perfect. He has to he has his problems. He's a very unpleasant person, which a lot of people kind of forget. He's not just like a grumpy Gus. He's like actually like a jackass.
A little bit, yeah.
He's awful to Courtney Penrose. I can't really defend though. I can't really defend how he handled Courtney. Is that the chap's name? The chap who was in charge of Storm's End?
Yes, he's the Castellan that he. Yeah, exactly. Like Stannis is at his worst moment, like basically post killing Renly. And again, it's ambiguous. Even if his level of involvement in that is even ambiguous, but there's no doubt he is at his absolute worst at that moment. And he basically the whole way the book is I actually really like Clash of Kings. It's actually probably my favorite book because it has this perfect. It has episode 4 syndrome where it builds perfectly to its climax. And so Stannis once Renly part of the reveal, part of one of those slow burn reveals of the book is how bad the Baratheon brothers and again I don't think Stannis is bad, but within the context of the book how bad the Baratheon brothers actually are, because you meet Stannis and Stannis has this witch with him, and then you learn that he's determined to fight to the end, and he's kind of like a not a head case, but he's he's really fearsome personally, and he has this sort of mystique about him. And then you meet Renly, and then you learn that Renly has this huge army, and then you learn that Renly and Stannis are basically irreconcilable, and that they're going to go to war. And then, and this is again really critical, you learn that Renly is actually a jackass, not just a jackass. He's actually Renly dies shooting down offers of peace talks. This has to be understood. Catelyn is listen, let's just do a great council. And Renly's no, fuck you. I am the biggest and the best. We're just gonna. And again, he tells him, "You're gonna watch me." Or tells Catelyn, excuse me. You're gonna watch me defeat my brother and kill him because he's gonna kill Stannis. He has to kill Stannis. You're gonna watch me kill my brother, and then you're gonna go to your son. You're gonna tell him what's gonna happen to him if he doesn't bend the knee. And then he dies. He doesn't die before that.
Claim either.
No, Renly has no. Renly. Look.
Yeah, Renly has no claim.
Renly is look. I will say this very straightforwardly. Renly is a scumbag.
I hate him.
Yeah, I mean, I like him a little bit when he's advising Ned at the end, like when when he says we've got to work against Cersei before Cersei acts against us. I like him a little bit, there, but apart from that, nah.
No, I don't think he's like stupid or anything. I think he's a very good character for like you want to talk about like impact to screen time. Renly is like way up there.
He is definitely a good villain, even if he's like a small time villain.
Exactly. He fits. He plays. Yeah, that's exactly the point. He fits his part perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, and then like of course, but ignoring the fact that I like Stannis and we all probably like Stannis.
Yeah.
Then you learn Renly's like this terrible person, and then he dies, and then you learn that Stannis not only does he have this weird magic thing going on, now Stannis has the big army, and it's like, oh my god, and Stannis basically becomes the antagonist of the book at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it builds to Tyrion, who is very much book 2 is Tyrion's book. That's not even a question.
Mm-hmm.
And he is like you can say he's a good guy or a bad guy or whatever. Like he's very much the protagonist of that book, and it makes for an interesting dynamic where he's the villain and he's the villain protagonist, anti-villain protagonist to Stannis's Stannis's antagonist, and it's really it's really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of neat stuff going on there.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a neat thing that George does is like he doesn't create straight heroes and villains. He creates people who are pretty bad people, but also can make you root for them relatively well.
Oh yeah, like I mean, Tyrion is certainly like the three main characters of the story are Tyrion. In no particular, it's Tyrion, Jon, and Daenerys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think anyone like in the first 3 books, I would argue Catelyn should be in there, simply because of how much of the plot her POV carries, because it does.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
what are your thoughts on Catelyn Stark? I know a lot of people really don't like her, and that like some I think like Order of the Green Hand are like the president and founders of the Catelyn Stark hate club.
Yeah, the video, why Catelyn sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, I never got it. I think she's fine. Like,
yeah, I know that like there's some odd writing that I have never been able to disagree with, that like she's thinking about everything else but the sex that she's having, and just everything is going through her mind, and you didn't realize that it was a sex scene until like she started until like she looked up.
That's not a defect. It's just weird.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's a defect, but it's not serious when it affects the plot. I mean, people rag on her partly because she's so hateful to Jon, and partly because she does so many impulsive.
Yeah, she makes like
things.
she makes one decision that she couldn't have made differently, and she makes one really bad decision.
Yeah. I mean, her hand was kind of forced in the case of Tyrion, although even there,
I would argue that it's rash, but I would argue that what she does with Tyrion is totally justified, and she goes about it in almost the exact correct way.
Yeah, I was always puzzled that Tyrion didn't appeal from Lysa to King Robert, but that's by the way. This series, we can talk for hours on this series.
Yeah, Lysa's crazy. Like, I don't think anything should be, like.
She is cray. She is kind of a less mean version of Cersei in many ways.
She's also a more pitiable version. Like a lot of people talk about how Westeros is oppressive and blah blah blah, right? That's not true for Cersei. Cersei gets everything she is because she comes from a wealthy family, and actually specifically because she's a woman. She uses her femininity as part of her weaponry. Lysa is someone who actually is beaten down by her role in society. Like you want to look at a quote unquote victim of Westerosi gender politics. It's someone like Lysa. Like she is very pitiable in that sense.
Fair enough.
Yeah, like she is forced to have an abortion by her dad.
Yeah, exactly. And then she's married off to an old man. And John Aaron's a nice guy and all that. But she's married off to, someone, undesirable, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So
And it's kind of sad that like just poor Lysa.
Yeah, like oh yeah. Oh, by the way, yeah, she's also manipulated by like the biggest scumbag in the series.
Well,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about like George is that he like focuses so much on like the Boltons and Tywin, but then eventually you realize, oh, the real threat is Littlefinger. He is,
yeah, it depends.
or at least one of the threats, because he is grinning away like a smug cat, thinking about how he is currently winning.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, the elevation of Littlefinger, and like the elevation of like it's interesting, right? Because we go from, and again, I still think the Lannisters are at the heart of the problems, right? Because going back to that whole political thing I was talking about earlier, but it's interesting how the plot moves from like the sort of like feudal dynastic evil, for lack of a better term, that the Lannisters are, to sort of the like the sort of like the moral nihilism of Littlefinger, and also like the the cosmic evil, psychotic evil that Euron is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is also something that's really like interesting, right? Like, so Tywin, right? Tywin represents, like, you could say Tywin represents like bad order, in the sense that he is like a tyrant. Oh, look at that, his name. But he's a tyrant, right? But he represents like bad order, and that's not good. You don't want bad order, but you also have to reckon with the fact that there's such a thing as bad chaos, or rather, that the chaos you want to cleanse the order may not necessarily be good. And once Tywin's gone, there's Littlefinger, but then there's also there's Euron. Euron especially fills this void because Euron is Euron is very important in the sense that he picks up a lot of the antagonistic slack, if you will. That's missing because and this is also another interesting thing about the series, right? Like the bad guys, the Lannisters, right, are the people who want things to not happen, right? They want to be able to sit on their victory. Mm-hmm. It's the bad guys
things to stagnate.
Exactly. They want they want to preserve the kingdom, for lack of a better term, right? Whereas it's the nominal, again, whether you think he's a good guy or not, it's someone like Stannis who makes the plot go, right? Mm-hmm. And again, like, for example, here's a good example of this, right? A really great way of understanding the first two books is understanding that everyone in not everyone, but the Lannister coalition and their allies do not want Stannis to take the throne. Mm-hmm. The Lannisters, Littlefinger, Varys, and the Tyrells do not want Stannis basically anywhere near them with power. And notice that once they think and you can notice this, once they think he's defeated, they immediately turn on each other.
Yeah.
And again,
especially Cersei kind of breaks the whole Tyrell Lannister alliance.
No,
because you were saying before, she's an idiot.
Forget that. Even that's later than the Tyrells murder Joffrey.
Yeah, they decide to completely throw the alliance off.
Yeah, the Tyrells and Littlefinger murder the guy they're marrying.
Yeah, because they wanted Tommen instead, because Tommen is more malleable, and also Tommen's not a psychopath.
Exactly. Like, I don't get me wrong. There's reasons for it, right? Like, it's not nonsense, but they only feel safe doing that once Stannis is out of the picture, right? And I'm not saying this in a way to big up Stannis, but it's important. Like, he serves a very critical role in the motivations of characters, and Euron's a similar way. Euron showing up and starting to move things pulls. Because the narration seems to begin to be moving north. It's moving toward the wall and everything else, right? Mm-hmm. But then Euron shows up and he brings it down south to Old Town and to the Iron Islands and Old Town, and it begins to, he creates a focus. And he gets to pull things around, and that's it's healthy for the story to like be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that a big thing about it is just that feeling that life kind of goes on, regardless of what you might think.
Oh yeah, I mean, what's the great line from The Last Unicorn? There are no happy endings because nothing ever ends.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually love that movie.
I fucking love The Last Unicorn.
Yeah, which I haven't read the book. I would like to though, but I do love the movie quite a bit. It was very essential part of my childhood.
Yeah.
So in terms of like his realism, like there's definitely like an era of like, yeah, this is kind of a little bit hyper stylized just because it's a book. It's not like completely realistic, but it's pretty dang close.
It's. I mean, this is tricky, right? Because at times it goes like, because there are a few different ways you can go with it. Like in terms of like, certainly in terms of character reaction, like what I talked about earlier, like they feel like real people in a world with motivations, right? Like that's 100% consistent.
There's also a level of detail of description. It's very, if you compare it with Tolkien, which is a bit more generalized, it's a very specific descriptions of like the smells and sounds and everything like that. Sometimes I think the realism gets carried. Sometimes he carries the gritty aspect a little further than he needs to, and some of the sex scenes and people rotting and all that stuff, it gets a little bit more than it gets a little gratuitous at times, but it's the level of detail that's in terms of world building. I think that's why people think the world building might be better than it actually is, because the world painting is so good.
I think also like his monetary system doesn't make any sense.
Baby, you want to stuff that Aragorn tax policy right back down his face, like Jesus. What is he talking about?
Like how much like a gold dragon is worth in book 1 does not make any sense with book 3, like at all.
Yeah.
Maybe there was inflation or deflation or something.
Sure. Like
rapid deflation. Dang.
You'd expect inflation, I guess.
Littlefinger actually is conjuring them up out of the air. Yeah. But I think another thing that's kind of like, I think his realism is kind of like, it's also overstated in that like okay, so again, like if you're using if you're using the show to imagine what things look like in Game of Thrones in A Song of Ice and Fire, you will be very, very, very wrong. If you actually read what he writes, like not only like it's vivid to the point of garish at times.
It's also on a scale that I don't know if you could do it in anything other than animation.
That's another thing. No reasonable person would ever begrudge them not having a bridge of burning ships in the Blackwater episode, right? Because that'd be ridiculous to try to make. It'd be fantastic, but it'd be ridiculous to try to make, right?
Yeah, I don't particularly want to watch Arya eating worms or some of the other things. I wouldn't particularly want to see a lot of that stuff on the television.
Forget that. I wouldn't want to watch. I wouldn't want to look at Daria wearing all that yellow.
I think that it's kind of just like George. That would not translate well to a visual medium.
But in some cases, I think it would. It creates, and this is something else. Like he uses a lot of his world looks like a fantasy world, right?
Yeah.
It is don't get me wrong, there are times where it is too much, like Dario's outfit. But there are times where it's very bright, it's very alive, it's very vivid. Like Bruce Bolton wears pink. He wears pink.
Yeah.
What he wears.
Yeah, he wears a pink cloak over black chainmail, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And you would think that's ridiculous, but the image of it works.
Yeah. There's actually some really good fan art.
There is some superb fan art. And Roose Bolton always looks really cool.
Roose Bolton is the height of fashion. You know that because he tells Ramsay that he wants to turn Lady Barbara into inferior boots. He emphasizes inferior, so you know he's high standards in boots anyway.
Yeah, that looks creepy. That looks insanely creepy. That doesn't normally when you kind of think pink, you would kind of think, oh, it's just a lame color, but no, it's just that looks fought. That looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know
you'd
if you
think
could do
he's
that
gonna-
within a. Oh, go for it. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say you'd think he looked like a girly. What kind of girly wearing pink?
Nobody owns it. I mean, like it's like it speaks to like a level of I don't say ownership, but like again, like going back to like the way the in-world motivation of the characters work. That's his color, right? Of course he's gonna wear it, and it speaks to like a level of like otherness, like because we wouldn't think, like, we may think that pink is like a girly color, but they don't. They don't think pink is a girly color.
Ah,
The color
The color
one
of
of the-
blood.
Exactly,
It
yeah.
is.
It's the color of flesh and blood, yeah. That top left one, that's the artist Amok, I believe. He has like character portraits for like everyone. They're probably like, to me, they're the best portraits to always reference.
I'd agree. Yeah, I quite like that one. Out of the, some of them are kind of odd. Like I think his Rainier one is kind of odd.
His older, like you can tell which ones are old, newer, and older. Some of them are a little funky. And I think his Rainier one comes from when she got fat. Actually,
Well,
she did
I
get-
actually prefer Naomi make. Have you seen Naomi makes arts images of Rhaenyra?
maybe not that one.
Like she's actually like pretty like she's got a full body, but she still like looks a lot more appealing than like how that particular artist writes. Or maybe it's just because it's like 2D animation style, like a Disney cartoon.
Yeah.
But that could just be me. I could be biased. I'm down for
Mhm.
that explanation. Yeah, I think like that really speaks to like George's like the depth of George's character and plot style, that he like we can talk for about an hour, a little over an hour, about like just his skills as a writer.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And he's clearly very knowledgeable about history. History is like clearly one of. I would love to take a history class from George R. R. Martin.
Well, it depends
Because-
exactly what you mean,
Yeah, well, like a medieval history class from George R. R. Martin. I would love to just be able to hear him lecture about like all the interesting things he knows about history.
Yeah, I mean, definitely informs. Like one thing he does that's really nice and that is always good is that he never does the one-to-one historical parallel thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's able to avoid. And he's able to make conglomerations and layers and things like that, which is always good because like it's so tedious to just say that right?
oh, sorry. I was just going to say, did we skip over a style of prose?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we might.
Sorry to
have.
interrupt like that.
No, it's okay. It's fair. I mean, we kind of like weave it through. Like, that kind of thing is like so easy to like work in everything else.
Yeah, I think we've touched on it a little bit in terms of like he thoroughly describes his world, and
Yes.
makes it so that he paints a very vivid picture. Though,
Yeah,
kind of a funny thing is that Storm's End looks like a nuclear reactor. Like that's how it's described. And a lot of people, I think Preston Jacobs kind of is a firm believer in this theory that The Song of Ice and Fire isn't fantasy, it's sci-fi.
Yeah, that whole
sci-fi. Yeah, or it can be described as sci-fi. In terms of style, there are a couple of things. One is, as Howard mentioned, how it relates to character, how it relates to character descriptions. Like, for example, to pick a very superficial example, Tormund will leave off the conjunction if. He'll just say, "I was you, I would do blah blah blah." So that's style. That's at the surface of character, but also their style is connected to world building or world painting, if you want to say, like the mild archaisms. Things like he was not like to blah blah blah, much and more. These various things that recur over and over again. So the style gives a distinctive air to the whole, a unifying air also to the entire world.
Yeah, one thing that's also kind of interesting is that he'll like, we've already said this. He'll like saturate you in imagery, right? Both of the locations, both like of the setting and of the characters. But when it comes to like the second and second character interaction, he usually won't do too much. he's very understated. One great little example is the scene where John beheads Janos Slint, right? He just, there's the moment, he kills him, and then he sees Stannis, and then, they just, he just says, he says something they just share a look, and then he walked away, right?
They share the bro nod.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yes.
It's nothing. Another good example is, I just had it. There are other good examples where it's just with Tyrion. There's a good example in the book in Clash of Kings. There's Tyrion and Cersei are talking, and Cersei's you have to promise you only tell me, and then Tyrion's yes, he lied, right? And first of all, that just works because it's funny the way it's presented, and it's also just very quick. It doesn't let you. It lets you kind of fill in, sort of maybe this is you can debate how good this is, but in this case, it lets you fill in certain things. So you can fill in that he lied, it's really sinister, or it's really congratulatory, or it's almost depending on how you're reading it, it's almost chastising. He leaves a lot open to the reader in terms of the way the characters interact with each other.
Yeah,
but he paints such a good initial picture that you can imagine all the way through.
Yeah, he does this a fair bit. He'll say so and so lied, blah 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 blah. So and so lied, kind of casually, offhand kind of a way.
Yeah, and other things, it's never too. His interiority, which again we established is fantastic. It almost deserts the prose when it's engaging in dialogue, right? Or it's engaging in immediate sensory information. It just happens, and this actually makes it moments where the interiority begins to creep in on those moments, let's put it sensory input. It actually makes them really kind of stand out. One of the best examples is definitely the way Catelyn begins to totally snap at the end of the Red Wedding. Yeah. Because what slowly happens is that it moves away from describing what's going on to her having basically a breakdown, because of course she is. And that it becomes so much worse than how bad it already is.
Yeah, the descriptions of birds were clawing at her face, where they're really her fingernails, or her saying, "Don't cut my hair," and Ned loves my hair just before her throat gets slit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the last words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's her interiority brushing up against the outside world, and that's. There are other examples I could probably think of, where usually obviously they usually happen in moments of great distress. When Brienne is getting eaten by the guy in book 4 at the end.
Yeah.
It's really, really tight. And it's a really good. It's just a good way of he suffocate. He suffocates the. He'll suffocate the
reader in detail.
Not that he'll suffocate the stage directions. That's what I'm looking for. He'll suffocate the stage directions in the interior, in the mind, with the interiority of the character, and that's moments where it gets really intense.
So one thing that I did want to talk about is his world building in terms of what he's done with his world building, with Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Personally, I really like it. I think it's really interesting. He's definitely wasting his time a little bit.
World painting is excellent, but world building is not always on such a high level. The way that the Starks have been, apparently they've been in power in the North for 8,000 years. How can you even in a place of high civilization like Egypt, you don't have something like that.
Yeah, his scaling here is a little ridiculous. And there's also we have to talk about this straight up. The changing seasons thing is crazy. It's crazy.
there is no way we would have. There's no way to even begin to imagine what a society would look like with that climate reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the same.
And here's another problem. If you like go through World of Ice and Fire, it like never comes up ever. It never. You would think that there would be some kind of story. Like, this is like easy. This is fucking easy, right? You have a story where there's a war and they're fighting, but then they go to winter and they stop fighting, and the winter lasts for years and everyone dies, and then when the thing comes back up, they decide, okay, we're not going to fight anymore because everyone's dead. Or the reverse, where they go into winter as friends, and then when they come out, they're different people. There's the fathers are dead, and now the new heirs don't like each other. That's like the easiest thing in the fucking world to write.
Yeah,
things like that are nowhere.
But there's a deeper problem.
No, go ahead.
There's a deeper problem in terms of how can you have like basically European flora and fauna.
How do you have agriculture? How do you have agriculture in this kind of system? How? The entire premise of agriculture is based around predictable seasons for growing seasons. Like, this is crazy. Like, I can't, like, this, like, I hate this part of the world building.
Yeah, unless season means something completely different, like is the Little Ice Age from in the 15th century, 16th century? Is that a season? Is that what he means by a season? Is that winter?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It is kind of like Westeros. And it seems like it only really affects Westeros. It affects nowhere else
And
than this planet.
it doesn't even affect Westeros. Like I just said, it never comes up in any of his stories. It doesn't come up in the Aegon's Conquest. It doesn't come up in the Dance of the Dregs, which sucks, by the way, but we don't have to get into that. It doesn't come up with the Blackfire Realms, which is the best thing he's written outside of the main story. It doesn't come up in like anything else. Nothing. Zip. It's like an afterthought in the story. It's so disposable.
I think it's mainly like a way. It's kind of like, at least kind of Robert Jordan, when he keeps his seasons the same, he kind of makes it like clear that like, no, this is not normal. This is definitely magic in nature.
Yeah, it's also like really like like you're right. Like, it's really vague if it does affect other places besides Westeros. I think it does, but it doesn't make it better. Like, it doesn't make any of the problems better.
No, it doesn't. It makes it kind of worse, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have no way of knowing how civilization would even begin to develop. Like you have like even like the Arctic civilization, like the Inuits and them, right? Like, they're still built around the premise that there are discernible seasons to do their stuff.
Yeah, there are seasons in the Arctic. I think the summer even gets rather warm.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like, and like even if it didn't get like super warm, like, because it doesn't get super warm, but like it's still discernible. There's still a discernible pattern. Like the harshness of the seasons doesn't exactly matter. The pattern of the season matters. Yeah. That's what matters for civilization building. Like for calendars, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, the calendars are a little vague too, but that's something else.
Yeah. Like, I mean.
So I'm actually interested. So like, what would be like your problems with Dance of the Dragons? I'm interested to kind of hear. I haven't really heard that many like criticisms of how the Dance of the Dragons progresses, but I'm interested to hear any kind of like.
I mean, are you familiar with it? I don't want
to. I am aware of what happened. I know what happens. I've read Fire and Blood, but I haven't like totally analyzed. I know that there's like a lot of like Maester bias all over the place, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense unless you kind of buy into the Maester conspiracy theory. I mean,
I think that kind of stuff is overstated, because I think the problem is far more. First of all, I would tell you that that's kind of like missing the ball. Like, there's different perspectives, obviously, but that's okay. Like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I just missed that last question. I had to step out. What was that last question?
Problems with the Dance of the Dragons.
Oh, I don't. You mean the book? The book Dance of Dragons?
No, the story, the in-universe historical event.
The
Targaryen Civil War.
I know. like narrative problems with it.
I can give you my perspective.
Yeah, go for it. I'm interested.
Yeah, go for it. We'll see what we'll see.
Yeah. So first of all, let's get one thing straight away. The dance of the dragons is like at its highest level, like almost perfect, right? It's exactly what you need to happen because you need to get the dragons out of the way because they're just too much, and you need a way to pinpoint the beginning of the decline of the Targaryen, empire. Let's say, right? So fine, all that's good. It's brought about by interscene dynastic conflict. Perfect. It's how Targaryen is destroying itself. It is atrocious in how it goes. First of all, the two sides, the blacks and the greens, very easy to describe the problems. The blacks are basically contemptible favorites. They are heavily favored by the narrative. And the greens are they're just
crazies.
No. They were crazy. That's the problem. The problem is that they're jobbers. They are total pathetic jobbers. They are terrible. They are set like oh my goodness. So
they have no principles. I do not like the greens at all.
I mean, I'm very anti. Put this on us. I'm very anti-black in the narrative, but we can get into that.
Mm-hmm.
But
so to kind of describe kind of some setup for those who haven't read the books, the blacks and the greens are the two factions, almost like they're
two rival sub-branches of the Targaryen dynasty, and they're basically half siblings, basically.
Yeah, kind of like the actual, kind of like George said that like the War of the Roses inspired him to write A Song of Ice and Fire. This is a very direct parallel to the Wars of the Roses.
Yeah, its main influence is actually called the Anarchy from earlier English history,
like the 12th century. King Stephen and Empress Matilda.
Yes, that's a reference. Yeah, the Dance Dragon is very much the Anarchy. But the point there is that, like, yes, so there's these two basically rival branches. The story is that there's the Princess Rhaenyra, who's the eldest child, but she's a woman, obviously. And then the king remarries, and eventually he has a son with his second wife, but he never, there's the older daughter and the younger son, and who gets the kingship, right? And in the sense of theming and things like that, you could say it's very interesting because, like, obviously modern day we're predisposed to favor, to say the woman should get the vote, but, there are reasons why I can go into why I don't like the black specifically later. The problem is that
we probably can't get into that in too much detail because
I agree. Only if we have time.
I do have to mention one thing, which is that Rhaenyra was declared the heir during the reign of the previous king Viserys and was recognized as such by the lords of the realm. So, and then the Greens went back on that. So that's why a lot of people favor the blacks. We don't want to get too, but I need to add that detail because in order for people to jump better.
I understand. No, it's fair. I don't mean to paint the blacks as like bad guys or good guys here. Because let me be very clear. Let me clear. Me saying that I don't like the blacks does not mean the Greens are good. The Greens suck. The Greens are terrible. Yeah. They're stupid. They're incompetent. Like, it is watched like, and also there's just a huge numbers problem that goes on with the dance. The Greens like lose like everything. They get punked like at every turn, and they're consistently like just getting. And then like the blacks are just getting shot in the foot. Like, or let me rephrase that. The blacks keep just shooting themselves in the foot constantly. And like there's a whole thing where like the Riverland like lords, like the Stormlands do like nothing, but they just show up at the end just to like lose to like basically an exhausted Riverlander army who basically does all the heavy lifting in the dance. Like it's really irritating to like read how the Greens just lose. The Greens just get kicked around. But they keep showing up, and the blacks keep winning, and then the blacks are just such awful people that.
And suddenly the blacks lose, and then suddenly the blacks.
The blacks are such awful people that they can't like capitalize on their victories. And you could say that there'd be a theme there, but it's not really a theme because the blacks are terrible, and but they get all the cool moments. The blacks get like all the cool moments in the story. They have the great dragon battles. They win the big victories. They win victories against hard odds. It's crazy. And yet
they go for the TKO of grabbing King's Landing, but then they end up losing because Tywin Lannister stole the bank.
yeah. And there's that, and the fact that obviously Rhaenyra proved to be such a bad queen that she can't keep a lid on King's Landing. But just like the whole way the Greens the Greens are totally ineffectual. They feel like they should be very the Greens are like totally inconsequential to the story almost. And the Blacks feel like the Greens are chumps, but then the Blacks feel like chumps because they can't do anything. And it also feels very this is made worse because it makes the story feel very uneven. It's not the story of the Greens versus the Blacks. It's the story of the tragedy of the Blacks. And it's not a very good tragedy because, again, the Blacks are like terrible people. I know that we can have a long discussion about the higher order principles going on. Rhaenyra and Daemon and their immediate circles outside of maybe the Sea Snake are just scumbags. And even the Sea Snake isn't that good.
Yeah, the killing of May Jaehaerys.
Yeah.
The Aegon II's young son. So one of the interesting things is it's not really a tension thing because it's written as an in-universe history book more than it is a tension-filled edge of your seat drama.
Yeah, it's that's true. But in that sense, it's just kind of reads the Blacks win, they screw up.
Yeah.
Can I mention one interesting thing about it, though? Which is that in presenting it as a history, he's presenting it various historical accounts. So he's got more or less pro Rhaenyra one. He's got more or less pro. I think he's got one or two more or less pro Green ones, and he's got and one of them is Mushroom, who's this court jester who tells all these disgusting stories.
Yeah.
So it gets interesting.
Just Mushroom's story of Rhaenyra and Daemon is so
it's gross. That's another thing.
It's really
it's gross. It's in not in a way that's obviously when it's interesting, but in a way that's kind of almost tasteless on Martin's part.
Yeah,
which is another problem. That is kind of a problem. There are times in his writing where he gets kind of tasteless.
Yeah, definitely. We were talking about that with realism earlier. Yeah. He just overdoes it.
I think that maybe we can kind of I should have put in where does kind of Martin fall short a little bit, but I think the main reason why I think we can kind of talk about kind of his kind of shortcomings as a writer when we get to his stagnation, but I do want to talk about I think we've talked a lot about how he got popular, but I think the main thing that's rocketed him into the stratosphere was the show.
That's not a question.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah,
that's pretty clear.
It needs to be. This needs to be understood. Game of Thrones was a cultural touchstone.
Yes,
its fall from being a cultural touchstone because of how bad the series ended is like that. I think I put it in the chat. It could be the subject of anthropology papers. It is fascinating how it utterly has been destroyed from public consciousness.
We had a riot with Fire Cannot Club Dragon, showing how it's pretty much how it may have been almost not set up, but almost destined to fall eventually, considering the absolute lack of talent of the people who are running it.
Yes.
The utter vacuity of the guys running the show just bleeds through. I hate them.
Yeah. And especially when you find out the the level of negligence and incompetence going on.
Yeah, just their unprofessionalism, right? If they were just total artistic hacks, but they were earnestly trying their best. Okay, fine, right? But how grossly unprofessional they seem at every turn.
Yeah, where it seems as though they actively are shoving their feet into their mouth.
Yeah. Purposely writing characters to die. Like the famous thing with Selmy, right? Like where the guy's like, look, my character doesn't die, and it's like, oh, that makes us want to kill him more. Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous.
We have to at least mention explosives in Morocco briefly.
Yeah, weapon smuggling into Morocco.
Wow, that's not. Yeah, see, like that's ridiculous. Like,
yeah, it's just like it feels like it doesn't feel like something I would. It seems like something that I would see in Big Bang Theory. I could imagine like something like that happening on an absurd comedy show.
if you presented the story of these guys, like you would think, like if you just presented these guys as they were in the production, you would think that this was like a joke. This was like a caricature of how bad Hollywood execs act, right? But
yeah, and it's just like, no, they actually did this. They are like this.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you know, down to showing up like drunk at like conventions, like just to that level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, in terms of relevance to the current topic, they did the show did introduce a lot of people to Martin's world, so it did help him get popular, even though it was absolute rot.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, the popularity of Game of Thrones cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
My parents watch the show; and they hate fantasy.
Yeah. Kind of. It's written by a guy several hundred years later off of accounts that were written during the time, and so he writes all of the accounts together.
Yeah, the whole of Fire and Blood. Yeah, it's presented as a history book, but it's like it's not as like, you know, it's not as much a propaganda piece as like you may believe it is. It's very like it presents what happens pretty straightforwardly.
I know that there are people who say that like Aegon the First is like a terrible colonizer imperialist, and it's like
I mean, I have very harsh criticisms of the Targaryen regime, but it doesn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah, and like everything like about his reign is propaganda, and in order to make him look better, so that to legitimize the reign of everybody who came after.
No, honestly, you want to know the person who comes way down in that book? It's Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys just comes across like that book is written so that Martin can just like fillet Jaehaerys for like chapters upon chapters. It's really irritating, and like I hate like I have issues with Targaryen dynasty, but that's like from like that's sort of like a higher order perspective thing. Certainly they're interesting characters and they're a great part of the world building.
It's odd because I believe he said that Jaehaerys was his favorite Targaryen ruler.
Well, Jaehaerys is like set up to be like the best Targaryen king. Period. It's like super obvious, right? He's just the best, and like he's best. He's great at everything, and except at being like a father, but not really. But he is, and he isn't, and like. I mean, never mind. We don't have to go into the fact that like, you know, he basically sets up
the Dance of the Dragons.
Yes, there's that, but what he really does is he sets up the underlying rot that is the idea of. So he sets up the Targaryen exceptionalism doctrine, right? Which is the idea that the Targaryens can flout the laws of the gods. Now, not to tip my hand too much, but that's tyranny. That's actually like if you want to get like one of the root causes of tyranny, it's where the secular power begins to usurp the power, you know, what we would call celestial power, right? In the Western world, it's understood that there is that for all that the power that kings have, they are subject to a law that is above them. They are not they're kings, and kings are to be obeyed, but they are not God kings.
Yeah, they're not gods on earth. They're men and women who like can be removed by the divine right of kings.
Yeah, they are vested with great power, but they're not God kings. Morality does not flow from them. What the Targaryens get going is that and it begins with Aegon, it arguably begins from the very beginning, but it really metastasizes in Jaehaerys because Jaehaerys puts into the doctrine this idea of this total genetic supremacy, is this position that the Targaryens can usurp the position of total morality. And this is the source of their tyranny. This is actually also the reason why I'm against the Blacks. It actually relates to this. It is the idea that the king is above the law in a very fundamental sense.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a practical sense. Not in a practical sense the way we think of the king being above the law, but in a very fundamental, in a very like metaphysical sense.
Yeah,
like,
it's one of the ways where it's less. It's one of the ways where it's less medieval, because in the actual Middle Ages, you do have the king be under the law, and the church, and there's two swords. You know, of course, that lots of people would put it the other way around. So we should at least mention the counter argument, which is that the Targaryens unified all these various places, brought about relative peace, and in that sense improved the law of
they
cool.
Certainly that's why they're the imperial, let's call it the imperial project of them, is not inherently a bad thing. It's okay to enforce order over. It's okay to conquer and enforce order. Like that's okay. That's not the problem with the Targaryens. The problem with the Targaryens is that they place themselves in the position of God King. That's the problem with the dynasty, and eventually it rots to the point where you have guys like Aerys thinking that they can just totally flout the law.
Or Aegon the Unworthy.
Yeah, I guess.
Aegon the Unworthy. Yes, Aegon the Unworthy is also kind of up there.
Yeah, the whole incest thing gets to be a problem.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird that like the Faith like have a giant problem with incest while they have dragons, but then like once they don't have dragons, they don't bring it up at all.
Yeah, Jaehaerys like pulls like a fast one on them. It's kind of like it's really silly.
Yeah.
It's also worth pointing out that like I don't think Daeron II is as good as people think he is, but it's worth pointing out that like the reign of kings from Aegon III through Maekar, who I really like Maekar. I think
Maekar's cool.
I think Maekar's really underrated as a king, like in terms of his like historical valuation. But like if you looked at the kings from like Aegon III through Maekar, and even Aegon V to an extent, you get like I think that's actually the best run of the Targaryens, because they're not being sexual degenerates. Sorry, they're enforcing their kingdom through non-dragon means. They're not like leaning on the fact that they have super weapons. It's actually really good, and that I would argue is like the true peak of the Targaryen dynasty, even with the Blackfire rebellions.
Yeah, Aegon V might have ended up being the best king if he'd been able to keep his lords in check better.
There's also his sons. Like there is a personal failing on his part, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not as
Egg isn't the best dad. Like he clearly like wanted his kids not to do the incest thing, and then for whatever reason, like his son and daughter wanted to bang. And,
yeah, exactly. Like, come on.
And,
like they like
kind of
wedding.
thing, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's framed as like they were in love and they decided that they wanted to.
And like this is like a thing
that's weird.
Yeah, and like this is a thing that comes up all the time, like when talking like people like criticizing or like praising the series. It's this like in-depth criticism of feudal society. It's like, okay, sure, but like his sons, you're in a house, in a noble house, in a royal house. Everyone has a part to play. It's their responsibility to get married to certain people for the good of not just their house, but for everyone else. Like people talk about, and again, I hate to like make it seem like this, but women have to marry. Like men also have to marry people who they don't want to marry, and men also have to go fight and die, just like women have to give birth when they don't want to necessarily give birth. Like it's not, and this is the way societies, like a lot of societies are. It's just and part of Martin's strength is he's just very upfront about it.
Yeah.
It's not like, again, I don't think he's making a moral indictment on like feudal medieval Europe. Like it's not a moral indictment on, on the Middle Ages. It's just a very stark representation of what they are, or a portrait of what they are.
Yeah. And I think the one thing about about Martin that's kind of interesting is that, at least with the Targaryens, what's that? The Westermark effect does not exist in Westeros for whatever reason.
I'm sorry, the who effect?
The Westermark effect is this idea, like, so you see a lot of the times this idea, you see childhood friend romances, right? A lot of times, right? But the Westermark effect tells us actually that if you're friends as kids, you're actually less likely to be sexually interested in each other when you grow up. And this is part of the reasons why siblings don't usually want to bang each other. Correct me if I'm wrong. I apologize if I totally.
I think that is actually a fairly accurate summation of the Westermark effect. Like if like people are raised like as kids as siblings near each other, like they're less likely to they are like almost, it's almost like impossible for them to like get like sexually involved.
Yeah, it might depend on the culture, though.
Yeah, it's also worth pointing out. Also, I have to say this. I have to say this because it's so annoying me all the time. The people in the Middle Ages were not philophiles and pedophiles. They knew to wait for women to be sexually mature before they had kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like the difference is that obviously once they became sexually mature, they're they'll always have kids. But like yeah, exactly. But they were not marrying and banging 14-year-olds all the time. That is not how that worked.
Yeah, maybe he overstates that.
Yeah,
I mean, he absolutely overstates it. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, do we have to revisit the chapter with what's her face, the Valerian girl at Aegon III's big gala? It's the gross.
Yeah, that one was weird.
Oh, like the 6-year-old girl that he fell in love with?
Yeah, the 6-year-old girl who's the most beautiful girl in the whole realm. Like, what?
Well, I mean, she's probably cute and charming and stuff, but...
I'm sure.
But yeah,
kind of weird.
The food is supposed to be kind of undersexed anyway.
Yeah.
That is weird.
Yeah. And I think like another aspect of like Martin, I think like this has been really good. Like we've been fairly focused on like Martin and like the story that he's created, but now we kind of like I kind of want to talk about the YouTube culture around these.
Sure. Like you mentioned, you brought this up earlier, and this is actually a worthwhile topic. The YouTube like theorizing that went into the story is like huge.
Yeah. First, I think like a lot of it was like kind of around the show. Well, first, I think like once the show really got going into season 4 and 5, that's when the theories started really going nuts, especially when the show got more and more vague. But also like, especially when like season 5 was kind of lacking, people went back to book 4 and 5 to see what was up and start theory crafting what was going to happen in Winds of Winter. And especially like with the World of Ice and Fire, at least like History of Westeros, and a lot of other people started like creating theories about like the history of Westeros, like what this vague piece of the world building could mean and such like.
Yeah, he leaves a lot of, I mean, I hate just compare to Star Wars, but he leaves so much open that there's actually plenty to work with, right? And it's actually really interesting. And then I can be pretty down on YouTube on tinfoil. I actually really can. I know I kind of trashed it a little bit earlier.
Oh,
but
yeah,
there's
I don't
some
like
legit
tinfoil either.
Yeah, I really hate it. I think it like it's basically like it's what literary analysis. It's like pretending to be literary analysis, right? But there were some really good, solid theories, right? And even if they weren't great, they made you. Even if you didn't like root them, they always made you think. Of course, they're better than the show. I mean, like my friend, who basically helped me get into this, his big one was that Bran was the Night King doing some time travel shit.
Oh
which
I
honestly, I would have been totally for. I don't personally like time travel a whole lot, but like time loops, I can get down with. And thematically, it would have really made some sense. You could have done some really cool things with it. I was all for it.
Yeah.
Miles ahead of the show as it was, but whether it would work for the books is another question, of course.
Oh yeah, like that's a whole other thing. Like obviously, we can make a distinction between the shows and the books in that kind of respect.
Yeah, since there is no White Walker Sauron type,
there is no known leader of the others, right?
Yeah, they seem to have some measure of culture, but that's only in the first chapter. It's
Yeah,
very
they are like a people, but that's as far as we get.
Yeah, in the prologue, I believe there's like an officer or something like that, but
yeah.
and that's inferred because we don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I mean, what we can understand is that there are like they seem to be like actually like not like maybe not like demons like the classic ones, but they basically seem to be like evil ice demons. And I do mean like evil. Like there's the tons of theories that they're actually like just good guys. It's like they're not presented that way at all. That's not the way they go. That's not the way they operate. They seem to hold. They have no sanctity for anything. Like they seem to desire either your death or your worship, as like that seems to be their thing,
or both.
Yeah, or both. And eventually both. Probably they probably would have killed Craster eventually. A good like little side theory that kind of pops up every now and then is that the reason the wildlings are on the other side of the wall is that they were people who sacrificed to the others when the others were in power. And they got kicked out.
That's actually a very interesting theory. I actually like that.
I don't hate that. Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think to me that's a perfectly fine theory.
Yeah.
And yeah. No, go ahead.
I think that and then I think it's kind of interesting that the YouTube theories are kind of a combination of like what happened in the past and also what's going to happen in the future of the series. Is kind of interesting, kind of to see that there's it kind of goes both ways. Like as opposed to something like the Silmarillion, where the Silmarillion is very cut and dry. It's like this is what happened, whereas the past of the World of Ice and Fire, it could be because of Elio and Linda that it kind of carries over to Fire and Blood as well. But there's kind of a vagueness there. There's kind of like how like Maegor lived, when
it's very Elder Scrolls. It's much more Elder Scrolls than Tolkien, right? And I love the Elder Scrolls is probably my second favorite setting actually after Star Wars, but like it's very much like vague. Now obviously it's not as because Elder Scrolls can get really crazy, but it's presented that way where there is a very clear, like we can pick at things. We don't know what happened. We know what people say happened. And that goes back to the thing we're talking about with the characters. Like that itself informs you of things, the way people think about things, right? The way people record things.
Yeah,
and also in that sense, the YouTube videos they're fun because first of all that gives them length. That gives them information value. That gives them, it makes them better than if they were just guessing at what would happen in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's certain personalities that you get used to. It becomes a matter of the personality almost, not instead of, but at least in addition to the actual content. I mean, who cares if N plus A equals J is correct? I still like the green hands.
Yeah. Also, Dark Souls absolutely counts in that category in the way it presents its information.
Who does?
I'm just referring to a guy in the chat.
Dark Souls.
Yeah, Dark Souls is also in that mold. A little less so, I would say, because it's kind of like exactly how the information is a little different. Because a lot of information in Dark Souls come from item descriptions, not like in-universe text written by known characters in the universe. But it certainly makes up for that level of the different authors with what exactly does this all mean? But
I do wonder how much of an impact YouTube has actually had in terms of the popularity in the world at large, and I'm not sure of the answer to that because I mean we follow these or some of these YouTube channels, but then we're all nerds, so I don't know. I don't know what effect it has for people on the outside. I know people, sadly, who've watched the show and have never read the books ever.
Well, I know people who watch the show and can't even name the characters correctly. So,
we've all like that. We've all come to contact with that.
you
that
know, like
dwarf guy, or the guy with no hand, or
Khaleesi. That's the best
Yeah.
one. Khaleesi, and I don't
Khaleesi.
look. I get it if you're just watching casually. I get it. I'm not gonna totally just. I'm not here to be a gatekeeper, but it's grating.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie into you, but yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think to your point though, I think what the YouTube theorizing it lent Game of Thrones a level of like cultural credibility.
Mhm.
Right? In a way that like, and I don't mean the Sopranos are bad in any way, but like you didn't see that with the Sopranos, right? Because you didn't have to, because Sopranos is just a mob movie. You know what I mean? Or it's a mob series, right? You can
Yeah.
theorize, but like it's not like it doesn't take on the scale. It's not an epic the way
It doesn't
Game
have
of
the
Thrones.
depth, perhaps.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the depth, doesn't have the scale. You know, Game. It sort of lends it lends like a cachet to Game of Thrones that there's a whole like deep well of theorizing that goes into it, even if you don't really engage with it.
I think that also like the theory people were generally the people who would also like capitalize on reviewing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
Doing it on YouTube, and that kind of what drew people. And kind of now it seems as though like the theory, like part of the problem is because there's no new content anymore after like Fire and Blood. The theory crafting is kind of going to. I think it's slowly going to die unless Winds of Winter comes out in the next 2 or 3 years.
They're scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? I mean, like it's either that or they're going to completely go off. I mean, they already have in some cases, but like they're going to go completely off the rails.
Yeah.
You know, like there's only so many ways you can like, find this secret hidden identity thing.
Yep. I think Sir Pounce's Azor Ahai.
Yeah, that one. That's definitely one of them.
Oh, come on. He's Sir Pounce. Of course he is going to be Azor Ahai.
He doesn't need to be Azor Ahai to save the day.
He is just
But he will
all
be.
powerful. Well,
He will.
Thing is, Azor Ahai isn't even that good enough for him. He is the Lord of Light himself made flesh.
Oh wow, that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's kind of interesting that so what's like, I guess, so what's like a middling, like you can kind of see where you can come from. It's coming just kind of as an example, like a middling level theory that you think is complete bunk. Like for me, I'm thinking, what's a really weird one? I guess that are Ned and Sharadane are John's parents. That's one.
Yeah.
That's not that far out there.
It's not like ridiculous, but it's just kind of like to me, it just like so misses the point. Like, okay, there's parents. Like John's parents are not actually that important. That's part of the point of his story.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. I mean, the one that I dislike is Cersei and Jaime are Targaryens. Because I remember
that one's the word. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Or like Tyrion's a Targaryen. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Tyrion being a Targaryen, at least there's the dragon dreams and stuff he had. Although they're not really dragon dreams because they're not prophetic necessarily. At least there's that. But for Jaime and Cersei, it's like, because after a while, everyone becomes a Targaryen. I remember when I first joined the Song of Ice and Fire forums at Fora, and I'm like, okay, Jon is a Targaryen, Tyrion's a Targaryen, Jaime and Cersei are Targaryens. Like, everyone in the Bloodline is a Targaryen. The rat that Theon was trying to eat is probably a secret Targaryen. Just got enough already.
Yeah. I think another problem is, I think like part of the problem with that is that Cersei definitely has a lot of parallels to Aerys. Like that's kind of one interesting thing about George is that he will do narrative parallelism between his historical characters and his current characters.
Uh-huh.
Like Rhaenyra is kind of a combination of Cersei and Stannis in a lot of ways.
Sure, there's something there. I don't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I would disagree on Stannis with Rhaenyra a lot, actually, but there's something there.
Or like there's kind of some stuff with like the sea snake is kind of a bit of Salador San and the Valerian admiral Damon Waters.
Sure, there's something there. Yeah, I get what you're going for.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
like
a little bit.
Aegon the Third is semi-similar to Jon Snow in some ways.
Sure, like the big one is like Maekar and Stannis, right?
Yeah, Maekar and Stannis are definitely more parallels.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
and-
that's why people who like Maekar and also probably like Stannis.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Let's
It
see.
is very impressive, like how fast this got. Like, I think that it didn't hit like the main like this came out around the same time around the MCU, maybe like 2 years after the MCU. And it was kind of like it began and ended like roughly around the same time. And
What's AO2? Sorry.
That's Attack on Titan. I think that's a little unfair to Attack on Titan. I that's a little unfair to Attack on Titan because Attack on Titan have to deal with like the scheduling of the scheduling of the anime as well.
I still didn't quite catch it. Attack of Titans?
Attack on Titan, it's an anime.
It's weebs.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
It's-
Fair enough.
It's weeb stuff. You would not be interested.
It's probably interesting enough, but
It's I thought it was I read all of it. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was like they pull the Code Geass ending, spoilers, which is basically the bad Watchmen ending. And I hate that ending. So but it wasn't like it was never as good as everyone said it was, I think, but it was never like it was never as bad as the haters thought it was either. Like it was just okay. It was just a good like little I appreciate that it took itself seriously. I liked its tone. I like its I appreciate all of that.
Yeah.
I respected his attempt to make a good story. Like,
yeah, but we probably better not get too
Yeah.
far off topic,
Yeah.
especially since I have to
Yeah.
go in like 10 minutes or maybe a quarter
Oh,
hour.
Yeah.
20 minutes tops. I should be.
Okay.
Go off and
Okay,
do
we can-
something else.
We can kind of go over a lot of things. Like I think like we've talked a lot about like why the books caught on. We've kind of covered that. I think the major problem, I think like it's both a boon and a little bit of a curse to Mr. Martin that he has not put out very much content in the past decade. Because he's mainly kind of been focusing on side projects. I think Overlord DVD put it this way, that he's basically kind of been neglecting his 5-star restaurant and kind of going to his fairly good hot dog stand down the street.
I mean,
Yeah, pretty much.
that's probably true. And like to sort of like preempt the argument that like he doesn't owe us this. First of all, as an artist, he owes it to the work itself to finish the work. And second of all, he does owe it to us because he gets his his contract on the premise that he's going to sell the books, and we buy the books on the premise that he's going to finish the series. So, he actually does. There actually is a consumer-creator relationship there that he's building.
Yeah,
My-
and the way we've been. I mean, after we've been so caught up into it, it would be kind of an obnoxious move to not finish it and not to allow it to be edited after his death either.
I think that kind of it's a little bit more simple than that. I think honestly it's more to do with the fact that he promised at least a few dates several times where he said that he would bring out the book.
Yeah, there's also
But
the
he
fact
hasn't.
rolling back.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also really bad.
Yeah, like if you set a date, just set the date. It's not good form to to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then you lose credibility. We're like, dude, you told us 6 trillion times already you're gonna finish. Like, we don't believe anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, like and kind of like it seems like he's doing a lot of different projects, like and are like and they're not like small side projects. These are big time consuming projects. At least like 6. It's like 5 shows or something based on his work.
Yeah, in total fairness, he is a professional like writer.
Like, yeah, he's a pro. Yeah, I definitely like believe like his credibility, but it's kind of just like it's taking away time they could be using to finish this book, and it kind of seems like he's lost the plot a little bit. Like he's talked about a couple of times about the Myronese knot, and that he put himself in by cutting out the 5-year gap that he originally planned.
I like, sure, I can understand that would trip him up, especially if he has certain things he wants to do, but like, you know, like, and I hate to like say, like, oh, it's so easy, but like there are ways, you know, you can solve that problem. Like part of the problem is just the problem of distance, right? Like imagine if Daenerys had gone to Volantis instead of Meereen, right? Been way. First of all, you can do all the same things. In fact, you can do more of the same things because Volantis is a Valyrian, like it's sort of like, you know, it's a daughter of Valyria. It's, you know, it's part of her heritage. So you have more theming going on there, and more critically, it brings her closer to the Seven Kingdoms, and it brings her into. Granted, it's quite a bit of distance, but it potentially brings her into Arya's orbit, which is also really valuable.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing, in this case, it's the scale of the world he's created kind of coming back to bite him.
There's that, and there's also the fact that, like, I alluded to this right at the beginning. He has to just pull the trigger on some things. For me, and again, I could be proven wrong. There are 1,000 different ways you can solve the problem, but for me, the way you solve Daenerys' problem is really simple. She has to come back to Meereen, and she has to go. And I'm not saying she has to be a villain. I'm not saying she's, you know, we can moralize about this everywhere, but she has to basically go on a bloody tear through Southern Essos, right?
She has to burn through a lot of territory very quickly.
Yeah. But the thing is, you can do that if she cuts. You know, she could potentially do that if she cuts loose, right? And you can justify the fact that she's actually growing in strength because she's gaining 3 people all along the way. And then eventually she has a motivation because of the Tattered Prince to go to Pentos. That brings her back to Illyrio. Illyrio can reveal whatever he wants to reveal to her. I mean, there's tons of theories. Some I like, some I don't like.
Like Aegon, the various theories of the identity of Aegon.
Yeah, like, even if he just tells her, well, already know, right? That would be enough. But he can he can say tons of things, right? There's a whole theory about like who Daenerys actually, you know, if Daenerys actually is who she thinks she is. But Illyrio can give her like both, like Illyrio is her ticket across the narrow sea, not in a material sense because she can get the ships from anywhere, but he's taken from across the narrow sea in a narrative, in a motivation sense.
Yeah,
he's the one who can rile her up to go, like, to really go out there and get him.
Yeah, well, Tyrion, I guess Tyrion could do that too, but yeah,
Tyrion can.
Yeah, and Dany wouldn't even have to, like, she wouldn't have to go Mad Queen and burn Meereen or any such rot. She could just go after the slavers and maybe go for the Green Grace, who some of us suspect might be the Harpy or something. You know, go after some of these people.
Yeah, she doesn't have to we can debate on the morality reactions once you read the story, but like logistically, she doesn't have to like murder everyone.
No,
like there's plenty of ways. Like she can just, and again, like this also lends into a nice little theory that I quite like, which is my little headcanon, is that like part of the way she'll test Tyrion and Victarion is she'll make them go to Valyria. Because remember, Victarion's great both. He can sell the High Iron Fleet and the Hell. And so she'll like, if Victarion survives the Dragonhorn and all that crap, ignoring that, but let's say he does survive, she'll make Tyrion and Victarion sail through Valyria to meet up with her land army on the other side. And we'll get wacky hijinks from Tyrion and Victarion. It'd be great. I realize this is just a headcanon. I realize this may not be as exciting for you as it is for me. But I like this.
I think that would be interesting. I think that
would be entertaining.
Yeah, it'd be funny as fuck. It would be pretty funny to. Yeah.
You can imagine Tyrion and Victorian trying to converse with each other.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be great.
Yeah, since like it's basically a dumb jock against a very intellectual man who's trying to sociopathize himself.
Exactly. Like, yeah, Tyrion's like degeneration, for lack of a better term, in the fifth novel is like really good. It's like obviously not in a good. It's not good for Tyrion, but like in terms of his writing, it's like some of the best Martin's done. It is just French kiss.
Yeah, chef's
Yeah.
I'll French kiss it. I don't care.
Yeah. So this is actually an interesting question. I think that's the person that I would have finish A Song of Ice and Fire is Joe Abercrombie. That's the guy I would say, like, if he is the closest to Martin in terms of creating characters that are bad people, but you still love them, and also creating very morally gray situations. Like, he already technically did the destruction of King's Landing with the ending of First Law. No specifics, but it's kind of a similar ending with a very hefty fallout.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I wouldn't know who he would trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, logistically, I guess it will be his wife or else Elio and Linda, but do they have the talent? I mean, they might be able to edit notes and stuff, but
I mean, it depends on it also depends on really what he has done, right?
yes, yeah. Is it on the level that you can publish it, or does it have to be written out?
Yeah, exactly. If he just needs editing, which who knows, then okay, then it just needs some editing. But like if it needs to be writing, then
Or you can just do what Christopher Tolkien did in History of Middle-earth and present the whole thing with all sorts of commentary and footnotes and God knows what.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, that's a totally different kind of book, right? Like,
yeah, that would be a second best to actually having his what he intended. Basically, that'd be a second best to having him actually finish the books.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna be. I am going to be extremely sad when this guy dies, since he's given us such a rich legacy in many ways.
Yeah.
Because I think that he's changed a lot of the game of how TV shows, and also to a certain extent books, are written. It's kind of one of these days I'd like to do kind of compare him to his contemporary Robert Jordan, because they're both very, in some ways it's like we're seeing a repeat of that with Sanderson and Abercrombie. Is kind of similar with Jordan and Martin. Martin was much darker than Jordan. Jordan was kind of like more classic fantasy with a little bit of a spin on it. He did get more realistic as the books went on, but it's very classic to begin with. Martin just kind of hits you out the gate with, no, there's not as much classic stuff here as you would get in other fantasies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little overstated. I mean, the extent to which Martin eschews fantasy tropes, I think, is a little overstated. But I definitely think what he definitely does is he sort of marries the high fantasy aesthetic to like a pulp flow. Like, I mean, this ties back to his writing style, right? Where I talked about, like, he really lets his actions play out in like without like really interfering with the character without letting the interior of the character interfere with it too much, right? And that really, like, like, you can't imagine that this could be filmed except that you lose the interior of the characters. And so he makes it really tight. Like, I
I hate to just compare it again to Dune again, Dune is not a contemporary of, or Herbert is not a contemporary of Martin, right? But I mean, like, I'll tell you straight up, Dune is good, but Dune is I respect Dune, but I do not like Dune. That book is a grind to read.
And then the sequels are like of mixed quality as far as I've heard.
There's Dune there's the Dune series written by Frank Herbert, and he wrote, I believe, 4 books. He wrote Dune, Prophets of Dune, Children of Dune, and God Emperor of Doom. I believe those are his 4 books. And also, then I think there was a 5th book called Dune Chapter House, and then his son Brian Herbert continued the books. And those have a really bad reputation as far as I've heard, but like, I'm always wary of things I'm always skeptical of how bad something can actually be, but I'm sure it's not like quite as good. But as far as I know, the books that Frank wrote are actually quite good. And in fact, God Emperor of Dune is where he kind of like, reaches its full flowering, let's say. But obviously it's not as quite as iconic. Like Dune's worth is as like almost like an anthropological piece.
Yeah, kind of examining like kind of what was around, like kind of it as a cultural landmark.
Not just in this, yes, not just in the sense of like its legacy in pop culture, but like as a book itself, it's like it creates a living universe that is both wholly human and wholly alien. Like it feels like a real place and time, while being totally distinct from our own.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the Fremen, like the actual like the people of Dune, the the desert people, but also the larger political landscape of like the Empire and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can't get too much into Dune though, unfortunately.
No, I'm making the point that Martin's prose is exponentially superior.
Yeah. I do have to say that like I would love to have to see an author interview where George R. R. Martin and Joe Abercrombie chat. I would love to see that because I love Joe Abercrombie quite a bit, and they're very similar in terms of their mentalities when it comes to characters. Like the most sympathetic character in Joe Abercrombie's novel is a crippled inquisitor whose job is torturing people.
Well, fair enough, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of amazing that Joe Abercrombie managed to make that guy at all sympathetic and engaging. Possibly because he's had a really hard life because most of his body doesn't work anymore. Is the main problem because of he got broken really bad. But I think that that pretty much covers most of it. If you need to head out, Kevlarian, that's totally cool. I'll just ask the chat. Do you want to do Q&A, or do you think that this has been sufficient? I'll let the chat answers come in. Since I have one couple housekeeping things that I want to discuss, but I'll do that while the Q&A is coming in. So currently, my Kindle Vella story is still coming along well. I am currently all 3 of the first 3 pieces of work on Super Shots will be available by when Kindle Vella launches in the beginning of June. I think it's June 2nd. But that will be freely available for anybody who wants to read it. And if you want to read beyond that, you can buy tokens, which will allow you to read more of the story. But the first 3 episodes will be available by the time it releases. That's the current plan. Also, in 2 weeks, Battle of the Seven Suns will be released on. Let's go with the 30th. So kind of a nice even number. but that's going to be released at that point in time. Oh, nice, cool, nice to see you, Blue. That's the only thing that. Those are the two things, and then the book that everybody has been waiting for, almost as much as Winds of Winter, Dragon Blaster, will be coming out on the 26th of August. I'm clearly being serious.
Of course. We all know that's going to be at least equal to. Well, actually, it'd probably be better than. Well, this would be a really cynical thing to say, but it'll probably be. I'm not going to actually say this, but I'm just going to say this half joking. It's going to be better than Winds of Winter because we might not get Winds of Winter. But I'm half joking with that.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably get Winds of Winter eventually, but who knows about Dream of Spring.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Anyway.
Yeah. There's also, like, one thing that kind of George R. R. Martin sometimes does is he forgets plot points. Like, Al-Ardim and the other city watchmen who got basically sent to the wall by Tyrion, who have never shown up.
Yeah.
Maybe he was died.
I think there was like I think in Al-Ardim's case, I think the whole point was they got thrown overboard or something like that.
Oh yeah, I thought that. Yeah, that's.
I mean, he does drop the ball in like a few places, and like there are ways to reconcile it, but it's not like immediately apparent. Like one of the good examples is there's one of the things that gives rise to stupid theories, right? Like there's a whole there's a bit where Jamie talks about Jane Westerling, but his description doesn't match Catelyn's description exactly, so people are like, "Oh, it's a different person." But it's like, no, it's just it's a little bit of a mistake on his part. You can reconcile it by like saying that, she's not eating because she's depressed, because of course she is, or like, Jamie's not looking at, like, there's a great theory that the reason why he thinks Jane Westerling looks like a chump is because Cersei is like just that hot.
Yeah. There's also kind of an element of like that was a typing error. It's kind of the same thing with the Sifo-Dyas story.
Mm-hmm.
Where
it's a different Jane Westerling. I'm sorry.
No worries. Like it's just kind of like in both cases in Sifo-Dyas's case, a typo led to this whole character being created. And in this case, it's just the rise of giant theories that made it so that the author had to come out and say, "Nope, this was a mistake on my part. It's not a big deal. Please, just don't."
Yeah, I like Attack of the Clones, but man, I wish there was something to just tweak just a touch.
Yeah, I do like it's kind of like I don't hate any of the prequels. I find them relatively enjoyable. It's just that there's I can't like buy a lot of the plot developments.
The political, the specific, like George Lucas's big strength is that he's really, really good. Okay, for real, he's really, really good at presenting things very well, presenting things very clearly visually, and he's very, very good at weaving theming into things. His actual political construction is kind of weak.
And his plot construction is also very poor at points.
Depending on exactly how you want. For me, it's specifically at the level of politics. Like, I mean, we don't have to get too into it, but like thematically, like I love Attack of the Clones. Like it is an illicit. Like what is Attack of the Clones? Right? It is an illicit romance against the backdrop of a crumbling political situation. That is like totally my jam. And it just I apologize, you had to go.
Yeah, you probably had to go now. It's fine.
But like. It just comes up just a little short in places, and like certain things like don't make sense. Like the fact that like Count Dooku.
Why does Anakin appeal to Padme? I've never understood that.
Well, that's a whole other. I mean, like I'm not a fan of Kid Anakin to begin with, but that's a whole that ties into like theming as much as anything. But like why does Count Dooku use Jango Fett to do what he does? Like why? Why do you risk exposing your hand like that? Yeah,
there's a big problem there.
Like to me, it's like one of the critical, like the political conspiracy just kind of like falls short.
Yeah, like the whole Obi-Wan plot is kind of Like the problem is kind of just the typo is kind of just really like wrecks the story in some ways.
And it's just it's why is like, and there are other like little things, like not little things, like you can make like, it's like, wouldn't it make more sense for the separatists? Like the whole point is that Newt Gunray got off. He got off. So
How?
why forget that? Forget that for a second. Like, let's forget the fact that episode 1 should be a fucking like in universe. It should be a catastrophe. It should be a crisis of crises. That what is happening in episode 1. Let's ignore that for a second. Let's accept the fact Newt Gunray gets off. Why wouldn't the separatists be the guys who are angry at that?
Also, why isn't Padme on the separate, at least on the side of the Military Creation Act?
That's another thing. Like, to me, that's Lucas's. Like, I usually criticize this as like mid 20th century liberalism, like, or like you can even call it hippie liberalism, where it's like, oh, military bad. It's like, if you like the Republic, if you were on the side of, if I was like in universe, and I'm on the side of the Republic, I would be like shrieking at Padme that she is betraying the cause. Like, if you want a state, here's the reality of human society. If you want a state, you need a military. If you want a state, you need a military. That's the way this works.
And also just the fact that there is no military to begin with.
Yeah,
The
like that.
Military Creation Act is really stupid.
Yeah, that goes into episode 1's problem. That goes into the problems of episode 1, right? Like, it's like just the fact that a republic is that, like, I'm sorry, but republics are like really volatile historically. The fact that we had a republic for like 1,000 years is kind of like what, you know?
Yeah, like Rome lasted for a while, but
not just as a republic, you know? Like Rome lasted a long time. Like Rome lasted about half its life as a republic and then half its life as like an empire.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And like there are other things, like obviously Palpatine is a bad guy. Like he's literally a satanic bureaucrat, right?
Mm-hmm.
But don't tell me that the political organization of an empire is like inherently evil when like republics are like terrible. Like republics can be terrible places.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's kind of just, I don't know, like it's just very like, it is like, and again, like, because I could see what he's trying to do, and I love Star Wars. I love the aesthetic of Star Wars. I love the sort of like the moral theming at play in the story a lot, but politically the story just
falls apart on multiple levels.
Yeah,
and it's really sad and frustrating because, like, I definitely agree with you. Like, I really liked Star Wars as a kid. I kind of transferred to Lord of the Rings more.
Sure,
but it kind of looks like the 3 people in chat don't really have questions.
No, yeah, I don't mean to take up your time if you need to go.
No, it's not a matter of that. I actually have plenty of free time. It's just mainly like I've had about 4 hours of sleep in the past 24 hours.
I understand.
So I just couldn't get to sleep. I think I might have a bladder infection of some kind. I need to probably get that checked out because I just keep going to the bathroom. But we'll probably conclude it there. We'll definitely we'll be doing A New Hope on Thursday. I'm gonna have to carefully curate who's going to be on there since like a lot of people are probably going to want to be on.
I understand, you know, I won't, you know, I'm free. I won't, you know, I don't need to come on, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I wish you the best.
Oh no, I just mean in the existing pool.
Yeah.
Like this was actually like, I actually like this size of, like how like of crew more than I like the giant 6-person teams.
I totally understand. I would agree with you. I think this is a much, you know, I can believe me. I've seen the 6-person ones and it can get a little cumbersome.
Yeah, a little bit hectic. Yeah, but I think we will conclude it there. Thank you to the 3 people in chat. Thank you to DM Notes. Hopefully, I'll be doing something with Madvocate in the future. I just reached out to him, and I really love his Flash videos and his WandaVision video. It's just like, thank you for pointing out all these problems with the Arrowverse and with WandaVision. I honestly am excited to see what he does with Falcon and Winter Soldier, because that is so bad.
I gave up on the MCU like a long time ago.
Yeah,
But that's me being as contrarian as anything. But that's a whole other thing.
I can understand the MCU, especially Phase 2. The only really good one is Guardians of the Galaxy when you kind of look at it logically.
I hate Civil War so much. I hate that movie. That's the movie that turned me off of the whole MCU.
Oh, really?
Because up to that point, I could say, okay, I don't like the stupid comedy movies. Like Guardians of the Galaxy is a good comedy movie, but okay. But it's a side project, right? I could dig the main storyline of the MCU for the most part. They were with me, and then Civil War was just it just sucked. And then no movie better encapsulates what I hate about the MCU more than Thor Ragnarok. I hate that movie. I hate that movie. And I think it's a good comedy. I hate it.
Yeah, there's a lot of it very heavily bastardizes Norse mythology.
Forget there's Norse mythology, just the seriousness of
Thor. Yeah.
Of this, yeah, the Scourge guy. I think his name is Scourge. The guy who
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this.
Carl Urban. Yeah.
Yeah. His famous moment in the comics is his stand at the bridge, and they turn it a joke.
Yeah. I remember I know that I've seen Scourge in Earth's Mightiest Heroes, where he's kind of just a henchman, but I imagine that's probably a really big moment of oh, so he's more than just the Enchantress's muscle.
That actually is the point of that sequence, right? He is a joke. In the comics, at that point, he had become a joke character and a joke villain who no one respected except one person.
Mm-hmm.
But he gives himself up to let everyone else get away, and he proves his worth.
Mm.
Stan, and it's intensely Norse mythology is serious, and Ragnarok is serious. We all know what Ragnarok means. Ragnarok means the apocalyptic. Yeah, it's the apocalyptic end of Norse mythology. It's the eschaton of Norse mythology, and it's a joke. It's a comedy movie with Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum, and I love Jeff Goldblum, but he shouldn't be
out there.
It's and this is the problem I have with the MCU. The whole time, it felt like they weren't taking themselves seriously, and that bothers me.
Yeah, the drama kind of leeches away a little bit.
Yeah, and
it seems as though people are trying to imitate Joss Whedon a little bit without being Joss Whedon. Quality of Joss Whedon as a person aside, he is a very good writer.
I think for what I've heard the usual scummy Hollywood things about Joss Whedon. Let's separate that from the art. I respect where Joss Whedon comes. I understand where Joss Whedon comes from, artistically. I hate that style. I can't stand quippy. I can't stand self-awareness in fiction. Kind of bugs me, which is why I talked about earlier about the way Martin and Herbert write their stories they're people living in a world that they actually exist in their context. With Bruce Bolton, in a Joss Whedon Game of Thrones, Bruce Bolton would wear pink and there would be jokes made about it.
And it would be garish pink.
It would be garish pink, and even if it wasn't garish pink, the point would be that Roose himself wouldn't take it seriously.
Mm.
And that would that would wind me up, because it does wind me up. But with and I understand as a comedy trope it can work, right? Self-awareness obviously works in comedy.
But when you're going for drama, it's kind of you gotta pick and choose a few things, mate.
Yeah, it's also just because the characters themselves don't believe they're real people.
Yeah, there's an element of that. I can definitely agree with that.
That's a danger you run into. And it just irks me. It's kind of why I'm also it's also kind of why I'm not quite as big a fan of Quentin. I know that Quentin isn't quite the same thing, Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
But he kind of runs wrong. It's very much of course this is a movie.
There's an element of he runs a gamut that I haven't really seen many Quentin Tarantino movies, but I know like his like aesthetic is hyper stylization to a certain extent in terms of like the fast dialogue and the gratuitous action.
Exactly, and like it's okay, and he makes it work a lot of times because a lot of it's like his best moments are of course where he's playing everything as straight as possible. But a lot of his more iconic moments are moments that are self-aware, and that's and of course Quentin Tarantino is light years more talented than Joss Whedon. I'm not a huge Quentin Tarantino, but light years ahead of him.
I need to. I know Django Unchained is on Netflix, and I'm interested to watch. Is that one of his better ones?
I mean, you've seen Pulp Fiction?
No, I've never seen Pulp Fiction.
Okay. Listen. I'm saying this as someone who cannot honestly say he's a Quentin Tarantino fan. Pulp Fiction is one of those movies that you have to watch in the same way I would say, like in the same way you hear people say you gotta read The Summer, or you gotta read Dune, right? It's one of those movies you have to like see to understand how we got here, right? Like with Gone with the Wind, although I haven't seen Gone with the Wind, right? Like or
it's
like
a classic.
It's a seminal, like definitive classic in a way that like defines it's self-defining. Like I don't even know how to like that doesn't even make sense.
It defines its genre in a way that very few other things do. Is that what you're trying to get?
It defines its genre, its time, its mood. Even it's like a perfect. It's like what postmodern art wishes it always was.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, and I can be very critical on postmodernism, but like, there, like, if all postmodern things were like that, I wouldn't really have too much of a problem with it. It's just like Pulp Fiction is just it's also one of the most watchable movies of all time. This is also really important, and this is also too.
And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my finger upon you.
You will know my name. Yeah. There was a point where I did memorize like most of that.
Yeah,
and it's such a like that's another thing. Like that is actually Quentin Tarantino's probably his best talent. His movies are so watchable, and Pulp Fiction is the epitome of that.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. No, that's exactly.
That's it. Yeah. That's wow. If that kind of okay, I will watch. Okay, I will watch Pulp Fiction. I recently watched Fight Club. For the sake of like a smutcast stream on Maggie McFish. I don't know if you've heard of that woman.
I recognize that name. I definitely. This guy's putting it very well. Like it's
actually a lady.
This person, this individual. I'm sure it's a woman.
But it is a lady. I've chatted with her multiple times.
Yeah. But yeah, she's putting it really well there. Fight Club I read the book, although people even say the movie actually is better. But yeah, Fight Club is also really good, obviously. Django Unchained is good. It's not as good as Inglourious Basterds is, but
I know that's on Netflix as well. I'll have to do a binge.
Maybe they're doing a whole Tarantino like month or whatever. But
that'd probably be good. I'd have to pick the people since like I know like most of like my regular team don't like that kind of movie. It's
like Inglourious Basterds is like Django and Inglourious Basterds are really weird because they're like, they're definitely worth watching. It's like if you want to watch actors like just act, they're really good. And that's part of Quentin Tarantino that he draws like he gets strong performances all the time, but it's like.
Yeah.
If you're watching for also when I say guy, I usually just mean like generally like that person. Like that's how I use guy.
Like but neutral.
Exactly. I use guy very gender neutrally. But like Tarrant like if you want like Christoph Waltz, I believe got the best supporting actor for Inglourious Basterds, and I would argue he almost deserved. Yeah, he certainly like if anyone deserved it, he deserved it. Like it's one of those things where like the movie like I hate to spoil anything, but like the movie starts stronger than it ends, I would say, but it starts really strong. And I definitely recommend. And same thing with like Django Unchained. I think Django Unchained like drags a little bit, but I would say the same thing about Good, the Bad, the Ugly. So that's just me. Would still recommend both the movies though, and Good and the Bad and the Ugly. And actually, I would recommend if you like westerns. I don't know if you do.
I haven't seen very many, to be perfectly honest. I need to get into some.
Yeah, finding good westerns is really weird because of the way they've transformed, right?
There's also like a saturation of them at a certain point in time that kind of makes finding the cream of the crop hard. Like I know, like apparently, like both True Grit movies are of relatively equivalent quality.
I've seen the newer one. I thought it was okay. I thought it was perfectly okay. It was one of the that's the Coen brothers.
Yeah,
and like the Coen brothers are like a. I don't want to say they're like a mirror of Tarantino, but they're very much they're in that realm of like weird and arty, but really accessible. And so I definitely True Grit is good. I'm a big fan of Russell Crowe and Christian Bale, so I definitely recommend 310, the new 310 to Yuma. If you want like a more modern one.
Okay.
The 310 to Yuma is really good as like a really tight. I like that movie a lot. I think that this person talking about Clint Eastwood. So Clint Eastwood has obviously he made his bones doing westerns, and not only so. First of all, there's the Dollars trilogy with Sergio Leone. Those are seminal. Like Sergio Leone is like one of those, like he's what Tarantino is like throwing back to a lot of the time. When he he starts like he's like a sort of like a definitive director, and a fistful, like I don't know if you're familiar with Kurosawa at all, but his the first of the Western movies is called A Fistful of Dollars, and A Fistful of Dollars is actually a Western adaptation of the Kurosawa film Yojimbo, and it's pretty good. Like I would say, it's definitely worth watching. But the second film of that trilogy, which ends with The Good and Bad and the Ugly, and The Good and Bad and the Ugly, everyone loves that movie. I think it's really good. I think it gets a little overrated because I don't like the way its pacing destroys itself. But the second movie of that trilogy is called For a Few Dollars More. And I would argue that is the best movie in the trilogy, actually. It has hands down the best villain. And that's actually one of the best like Western movie villains of all time. El Indio, played by Gian Maria Volante, and yes, I know his name, is superb. He is so good. He is like this. He is like if the Joker was like a Mexican bandit. He's awesome. He's this drugged out, PTSD-ridden psychopath.
That actually sounds pretty dang awesome.
No, he's not like the focus of the movie. Like the focus of the movie are these two bounty hunters who have to team up to go. Like they're two rival bounty hunters who have to go after him, and it's superb. And John Merlante, like if you ever seen anytime you see a reference to like a gold pocket watch, like the famous you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, I've seen Pirates of the Caribbean.
So you've seen this, like how Davy Jones has that locket?
Yeah.
Like that is a direct reference to Indio's, to the character, to that movie, and specifically the character of Indio.
Oh, okay.
Because Indio has I almost spoke too much, but he has this locket that he plays
Keeps
with.
Around.
Yeah, it's really, and again, he's not really I think he's the most interesting character in the movie, but
he's not the focus.
Yeah,
it's not a villain protagonist movie.
No, but he's a great antagonist. Then there's of course there's Once Upon a Time in the West, which is his fourth, Sergio Leone's fourth big Western, which doesn't star Clint Eastwood, but that's also really good. And all of this music is scored by Ennio Morricone, and Ennio Morricone is he's basically the pre-John Williams. And he is he's the guy who did The Godfather and all that, and Ennio Morricone is superb, some of the most iconic scores of all time. There's the man with the harmonica alone is better than most movie scores. That's from Once Upon a Time in the West, and then and as far as Clint Eastwood goes, just to keep with him, another good Clint Eastwood Western is High Plains Drifter. That one's really good. If you want a really good psychoanalyze, one of those sort of psychoanalyzing of a town movies. because it's basically like, I don't spoil too much, but it's basically about how this guy comes into this town with a lot of secrets, and he like it's like karma come to visit the town.
Ah, I see.
And it's like, to tell more would be to spoil, but it's really good.
Okay.
And of course,
I'm definitely intrigued now. I'm intrigued. You'll have to send me the list. I don't think I can memorize all of those movies.
I am telling you too much. I'll send you the list. I'll send you a list.
Yeah, send me a list. I'll definitely put it on the docket because maybe in the future, like a Western month, since I know at one point I'd like to do something about trying to find the second best King Arthur movie.
What's the best King Arthur movie?
The best one's Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
You sir, air. I'll tell you right now. Okay, if you're really looking for a great King Arthur movie, you gotta watch Excalibur.
I've seen Excalibur. There's some I think that there's some problems with characterization in that movie because that's kind of one of John Borman's failings. But I'll talk about it when I get there.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't understand, but Excalibur's, I'm a big fan. I love Excalibur.
Okay, I'd like.
But no, I understand that you're saying it's not a character movie. It really isn't.
Yeah, it's definitely he's trying to do the myth, and that kind of sometimes involves shoving the characters into making decisions that just kind of seem slightly random.
It's very it's a movie that trades on a lot of imagery and plot flow as opposed to character motivation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do know what you're saying. It is not a character driven movie.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well,
but yeah, I apologize if I'm taking too much of your time.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm just gonna take a 3-hour nap and go into work, and then I donate plasma in the morning, and then I drive my sister into skate practice right after. So
absolutely.
So today my day is this is kind of my relaxation for the day.
Yeah.
But I got at least a little bit of work done last night, so I'm cool with that. So I will see everybody later. Keep an eye out. Follow me on Goodreads if you want to keep appraised of what I'm going to be doing. I am going to be releasing the next book in the Dragonlord Annals, as I said, on the 30th of this month, so keep appraised of that. And Super Shots will be out on Kindle Vella when it launches. So, and Dragon Blaster will be released at the end of August, and that will be the end of the publishing season for this year. And the rest of the year, I'm just going to be trying to focus on writing more as well as marketing my stuff. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I'll see you later. Adios.